Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. The King of God, Asgard signed 100 million years. Chapter 81. Natasha Romanoff thought to herself that she didn't live up to it. But the shadow of childhood is not so easy to erase. No matter how strong she looks on the outside, there are also weaknesses. The memory of the Red House is lore for her. Like Batman, who seems to hold up the world, he also has nightmares. Dreaming of that alley, the Bat family went from six-legged to two-legged. Dreamed that a group of bats flew by, and then woke him up from the dream. The Red House is to Natasha Romanoff what the Batcave is to Bruce Wayne. Time flies. This period of time was extremely peaceful for Ron and others. Although the entire Beacon country is boiling, the plan to find Tony Stark has not stopped for a moment. But common people are all hanging high to the beat. Ron also didn't buy the stock of Stark Group like others. He doesn't need money at all. A black card is enough. Therefore, Ron ignored the extremely important opportunity for other traversers. Natasha Romanoff is doing her own thing with all her heart, as if forgetting that she is an agent. So does Jessica. Only at night would she disappear from the room and not come back until late at night. Natasha Romanoff had known about her condition long ago, but ignored it. And one night, Natasha Romanoff went down to drink water and heard two voices in Jessica's room. The other, it should be a girl, has a much clearer voice than Jessica. At least from this point, it can be judged that the other party is not very old. Ron didn't care, because it was little Gwen. I also heard them talking about Batman. Celestial Master. On this day, Natasha Romanoff found Ron in desperation. "What's up?" Ron asked casually, looking at Carrie, who was sitting cross-legged. Natasha Romanoff gave Kelly a curious look. She already knew that she was a bit special. Sitting like this every day, not knowing what to do. It's not that she didn't guess, but she didn't dare to think too much. "Nick Fury wants to know if you're good at finding people," Natasha Romanoff whispered. Anxious, Ron smiled. It seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. really can't help it. The entire Middle East is so big. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military are sending planes to search for it all the time, but they just can't find anyone. Under huge amounts of pressure, Nick Fury could only do everything possible. So I found Ron here. No way. Wani's father, Howard, was one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. after all. For the founder's son, Nick Fury can't ignore it. And, with old Peggy Carter talking, Tony has to be found. There are many people in this world who can find him. Ron didn't answer directly, but said this. Natasha Romanoff is definitely nodding. She also knows something on the mysterious side now, at least more than the common people believe. After all, Ron, the so-called god, has appeared, so what is impossible? If Celestial Master doesn't agree, I will directly decline. Natasha Romanoff looked normal, but she didn't report much thought. Didn't even want to bother Ron at all. But it was Nick Fury who annoyed her a bit, so she dared to ask. "Well, you tell him, if I help them find Tony Stark, in exchange for you getting out of this situation." Ron smiled and said, so that was his idea. After all, Natasha Romanoff was trained by the Red House, so being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent is too bad. Natasha Romanoff didn't say no. She knew she couldn't go back to S.H.I.E.L.D. What's more, she doesn't have much affection for S.H.I.E.L.D. either. Agent, where do things not do? It's just that the people on the head are different. Moreover, Ron is also doing it for her own good, asking her to serve him with all her heart. In short, this transaction is still necessary. I'll tell him. Natasha Romanoff nodded instantly, very seriously. Seeing her expression, Ron immediately said, "Come on, give me a smile." Natasha Romanoff had no choice but to squeeze out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Call him." Ron waved his hand. Is this still the fearless Black Widow in his memory? I was afraid that he had reached this level. And she couldn't show her coquettishness in front of him at all. Natasha Romanoff hurriedly called Nick Fury, not daring to meet Ron's eyes. Because Ron scanned her up and down, giving her a feeling of being seen through. The call was quickly connected, and Natasha Romanoff repeated what Ron had said. Nick Fury was silent for a moment before saying, "I agree." He weighed it up in his heart. Trading Natasha Romanoff for Tony Stark was not a loss. Although he is also very heartbroken to lose such a powerful advanced agent. $. Natasha Romanoff looked at Ron and nodded. Nick Fury's voice continued to sound. But the premise is that Tony Stark is still alive. Natasha Romanoff told Ron. Definitely. Seeing Ron nod, Natasha Romanoff responded. Now she's pretty much the talking head, even though Nick Fury already knew that Ron already knew about S.H.I.E.L.D. But there are still face projects. There are some things not to mention. Let him arrange for someone to pick us up, Ron said, not wanting to reveal too much. Although he can teleport over there directly, it's not necessary. After Natasha Romanoff finished speaking, she hung up the phone directly. Someone will pick us up in 10 minutes. Natasha Romanoff said respectfully to Ron. I think you should smile more, Ron said to her. Natasha Romanoff was definitely nodding, and she knew she was going to laugh too. But I can't laugh at all. She is still terrified now. Even Ron didn't know what she was afraid of. Soon, a flight vehicle came to the sky. Just let them open the door. Ron to Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff contacted the people above, and the flight controller opened the rear hatch directly. Later, Ron said to Natasha Romanoff, hold me tight. Natasha Romanoff hugged Ron decisively. She felt that she was flying, and flew directly into the flight device at a very fast speed. A somewhat balding white man had been waiting for them. Hello sir, I'm Phil Coulson. Seeing Phil Coulson, who was smiling like a good old man, Ron shook hands with him, and then let go immediately. That's Phil Coulson, the others Ron doesn't care about. Come on, it's over when I find Tom. Ron to Phil Coulson. Naturally, S.H.I.E.L.D. was in a hurry, so the flight controller was fully activated, and within a few hours, it had already flown to the Middle East. Natasha Romanoff has been by Ron's side and hasn't had much contact with anyone from S.H.I.E.L.D. Phil Coulson smiled and asked, Mr. Ron, how can we find it? Several other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents also looked at Ron. Ron casually pulled out a compass. Looking at the compass in his hand, everyone didn't know what to say. Among those present, only Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff's expressions remained unchanged. Phil Coulson was still smiling all over his face, and then looked in the direction of the pointer. The compass does not point south. Follow the direction it points. Ron to Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson didn't dare to delay for a moment and ordered immediately. Although Ron could use mental power or magic to find Tony, he didn't do so. Not worth the effort for a dude. After all, he was in no hurry. Anyway, Tony isn't going to die, so it's okay to suffer a bit, right? On the contrary, S.H.I.E.L.D. was in a hurry, and quickly found Tony's cave according to the direction of the compass that could not guide. I have to say that there are many caves in the Middle East. If you don't have an accurate location, it is really impossible to find someone. There's gunfire down there. When the flight of the S.H.I.E.L.D. 123 Bureau arrived, everyone could hear the sound of the battle below. Then they all ran to the side and looked down. At the entrance of the cave, a huge amount of iron lump just came out from the inside. That bulky appearance is about the same file size as 2 or 3 people. And the whole body is made of iron, which is also reflective in the sun. Tony, who controls the first generation of Mark, immediately launched the missile funded by the enemy, sending these Ring Gang members to the sky. The 10 Ring Gang suffered from being uneducated. It's fine if you don't have money, but you came up with the idea of letting Tony Stark build missiles. Although there is a reason for Obadiah's tearing up the ticket, they are indeed too courageous. There are really no guns, no cannons, and the enemy made them for us. Now Tony made it decisively, and it went into their mouths. Those who were hit by shells naturally had no scum left. In an instant, this normal cave area in the desert suddenly turned into a Shira field. The weapons in the hands of the members of the 10 Rings gang can't do anything with the thick iron sheet. And all of Tony's weapons are mass destruction. Flamethrowers, missiles, etc. are all funded by the enemy for him, and he has everything. Everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. was stunned. What are you doing? Just stare blankly. Ron said something casually, and Phil Coulson and his gang reacted. Hurry up and support, Phil Coulson ordered immediately. He had a vague premonition that the one inside the iron sheet was Tony Stark. Besides him, who else could come up with this thing? S.H.I.E.L.D.'s flight device is naturally not weak, equipped with a lot of weapons, and a group of agents. With the support of S.H.I.E.L.D., the members of the 10 Rings were quickly wiped out. Tony, is that you? Phil Coulson immediately shouted into a megaphone. Because Ironhide had aimed the missiles at them. This time, Tony Stark finally opened the mask. Who are you? We are Homeland Security. Bah, you should have a simple name. We are already thinking about it. You just need to know that we are from the Lighthouse Country. We have cooperation with the military. After some communication, Tony finally confirmed it was safe. Then, he came out from the iron lump. Who would have thought that the iron bumps would fall apart directly? He didn't want this thing anymore, and immediately boarded the military plane. This thing was naturally accepted by the military. S.H.I.E.L.D. was busy, and ended up making soy sauce. Phil Coulson was naturally unconvinced, and the people with S.H.I.E.L.D. also moved over. Finally got acquainted with Tony Stark. It's not easy. Ron said something to Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff also gave a serious nod. That's why Phil Coulson has such a good temper. If it was her, she would definitely not cheat on Tony without a mission. Because when Tony saw her, he said directly, "This beautiful lady, have we met somewhere?" Indeed, but Natasha Romanoff ignored him. This guy simply doesn't change his nature. Tony didn't make any awkward diversions. "Sir, I seem to have seen you too." He looked at Ron and said. A little familiar indeed, but he forgot. "Me too," Ron also replied casually. Looking at Tony's outstretched hand, Ron ignored it. Tony didn't know how long he hadn't showered, his body was covered in dust. Ron wasn't his good friend Rhodes. Tony felt a little embarrassed and recognized Ron. "You're the one driving the Camaro. This time I found you." Ron said something to him, then turned and boarded S.H.I.E.L.D.'s flight controller. Phil Coulson shrugged, and everyone didn't want to continue basking in the sun. It was another few hours of tossing and turning, and everyone returned to the Lighthouse Country after being refreshed. Natasha Romanoff kept her eyes on Ron. "What are you looking at?" asked Ron, as expected of Celestial Master. Natasha Romanoff said with emotion. S.H.I.E.L.D. searched for a long time but couldn't find anyone. Ron just took a compass and found it. Definitely, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. are already looking at the compass with red eyes. Everyone knows this is a good baby. But even if they were given a few more guts, they would not dare to take any action. Ron didn't expect to convince Natasha Romanoff like this. In fact, it is also simple. After all, this kind of thing has too much impact on most people. "I'm going to hold a press conference," Tony said to Pepper, who was coming up. "Definitely, I have to eat my favorite cheeseburger first. Would you like a lobster seafood pie?" "This can be." Tony and Pepper walked away while talking. Ron was also waiting with Natasha Romanoff. He took a second look at Pepper. He was indeed very capable, and he took care of Tony's life submissively. Definitely, Natasha Romanoff isn't bad either. Recently, Natasha Romanoff has been taking care of Ron's daily life. Although Jessica is outside in name, she always helps her. Jessica was very satisfied with this. There is a good income, and there is a place to live, instead of renting everywhere. Who would have thought that superhero could not afford a house? "Do you need me to take you?" Phil Coulson at the moment came over and asked with a smile. "No need, it's already here," Ron said to Phil Coulson, in the distance, because the hornets roared and galloped over. With a beautiful drift and flick, it stopped directly in front of several people. Bang! Moreover, the double doors opened directly, and there was no one inside. Unmanned. Phil Coulson didn't expect this move, but he wasn't too surprised. There are still many black technologies in S.H.I.E.L.D. For example, his own classic car can fly slowly, although it can't fly very high. Ron smiled and said nothing, gestured for Natasha Romanoff to get in the car first, and then he got into the main driver. "Tell Nick Fury the deal is done," Ron said to Phil Coulson, not giving him too much trouble. If it was someone else, he wouldn't be so easy to talk to. "Looking at what?" Kelly asked, hugging Ron from behind. "Come on, watch the fireworks," Ron said casually, pointing to the distance. "Look, there will be an explosion there soon." Kelly followed his gaze and looked into the distance. Her magic attainments are already very strong, but it's not enough for her to see what is there in such a far place. Can only vaguely see. It seems that someone put firework. "That's where the Stark building is," Kelly thought for a while before saying. "Yeah, that playboy hasn't been lingering in good Hollywood lately," Ron said while watching the day. In his line of sight, two Iron Men, one red and one white, are confronting each other. It's come to this point without Ron intervening too much. The only difference is that Obadiah got the Iron Overlord from the military at a high price, and then modified it himself. It's a pity that the most important thing about Iron Man's armor is not the armor at all, but the reactor on his chest. Tony Stark is the man who opened the cheat in this world. His ability is times worse than that of Obadiah's large group of scientists. What a group of them cannot do, Tony can do alone. Therefore, Obadiah still took the risk and got the reactor from Tony. And Tony can only use the old antique that is running out of energy. So there was this scene. Red Iron Skin and Iron Overlord were fighting in midair. This also profoundly told Ron a truth. That is to make up the knife. Don't think that you don't care if someone dies, you must watch the other person die with your own eyes. Unfortunately, villains never understand this. Although Mark II was lighter than the Iron Overlord, it was precisely because of this that he couldn't beat Obadiah at all. At the moment Tony flew into the sky crazily, in order to kill Obadiah frozen with extremely low temperature, and then threw him to death. It's a pity that Obadiah's fate is fatal, and the only strategy still fails. Tony was a little desperate. During the time he came back, he frantically took revenge on those organizations, but he didn't expect that the person who wanted to kill him was by his side. Why? So, he started a round of dialogue. Obadiah then told Tony what was on his mind. And took off the mask very pretendingly. It turned out that he was dissatisfied with himself a long time ago, Tony thought in his heart, and then seeing Little Pepper, he thought of the last solution. The Iron Bully also failed because of the previous battle, which caused the auxiliary aiming to fail. Then, boom, firework appeared. A laser beam went straight into the sky, making the whole night seem to turn into day in an instant. This is the explosion of the reactor, which caused quite a stir. For the first time, the citizens of New York felt the crisis of life. Now they are not as well trained as they will be in the future, and they look down on life and death, so they seem a little flustered all of a sudden. How could it be that after the New York War was over, everyone put life and death aside? It took more than 10 seconds for the mushroom cloud to disappear, and the light brought by it also began to dim. However, this night will not be easy for anyone. There really is firework, Kelly said in surprise. In her opinion, it doesn't matter whether it explodes or not. Ron took her dishonestly, held her in his arms and asked, "Do you like it?" "Like?" Clipper gave him a look, surprise on his face. "It's enough that you like it, dear," Ron said to Carrie. Kelly also looked happy. If Tony knew that someone was picking up girls with his and Pepper's masterpiece, he would be so angry that he vomited blood. But at the moment he didn't have that thought anymore. There was an explosion in the Stark group, and I have to give everyone an explanation. So, with the press conference the next day, the whole world shook. "I am Iron Man." Thousands of words merged into one sentence, and now the whole world knows it. This caused a sensation no less than Bruce Wayne publicly said he was Batman. After all, the popularity of the two is equally high, and Tony is the richest man in the world. Even the Wayne Group in the 600th world may not be comparable to him. So the sensation is inevitable. All of a sudden, it attracted all eyes. On social media, on forums, even on the street, Iron Man is being discussed, Tony Stark is being discussed. For a time, he was more prosperous than all the stars. After all, wearing a steel battle suit is the dream of many people. There is a saying that a mech is a man's romance. A steel battle suit, isn't it just a small mech? This stuff is real. Even Natasha Romanoff complained. If it hadn't been for Ron to save him, it's hard to say whether he would have survived. After all, his condition at that time was already terrible, and there was a possibility of being surrounded at any time. "Used to it," Ron replied. "Moreover, high profile has a high profile price. Although he has attracted a lot of attention now, many people will trouble him in the future." Tony doesn't really think he hasn't offended anyone for so many years, does he? Maybe he knew, but didn't care. Batman's method is still reliable, even if others know that he is Batman, but he does not admit it. If he doesn't admit it, others can't call him Batman, let alone do anything to those around him. Because the villains all know what he means by hiding his identity. This is the hidden rule under Gotham. The high IQs of Joker are not a joke, they can analyze who Batman is in minutes. But they didn't take the initiative to find trouble with, but tricked Batman out by playing games every day. And being as high profile as Tony is tantamount to telling the world that he doesn't mind trouble, just come to him. Didn't others hit him hard? And not only punch him, but also those around him. In short, this press conference lasted for an unknown amount of time before Tony managed to escape. Put it on well and make him very comfortable. When I drove back home, there was fire and lightning all the way, bouncing around. Jarvis. When he got home, he said something. However, Jarvis did not answer. Quote? Knowing that his artificial intelligence can't go wrong by itself, he knew something must have happened. So he went in cautiously, ready to go to the bar to get the gun. Immediately, I saw a very racially capable person in the dark, showing one eye looking at him. Tony's hands trembled with fear. Can black people come into his house too? No. Can black people stay near the rich? It's broad daylight. At this time, the head that was so black that it could reflect light finally made a sound. I'm Iron Man. Do you really think you are the only superhero in this world? Tony Stark. Director Braised Egg's deep voice sounded. Hearing Nick Fury's words and seeing that he didn't look like he was going to rob, Tony finally settled down a bit. Would you like a drink? He walked to the bar alone and poured himself a glass of wine. Nick Fury naturally refused. Tony maintained his posture, trying not to look too flustered. Okay, who are you? What did you do to Jarvis? I am the country. The name of your bureau is too old-fashioned to remember. Tony interrupted directly. I am the director of this bureau. As for your AI, just keep him quiet for a while. Nick Fury stared at Tony with one eye and finally spoke. This made Tony a little uncomfortable. Because the glasses are too oppressive. Although he was not afraid, he found it annoying. No one has ever looked at him like this. At the same time, he was also thinking in his heart that it was time for Jarvis to upgrade. His favorite work was cracked in this way, which made him even more unhappy. Then what do you mean by that sentence? Tony finally asked. That's why Nick Fury came to him. It doesn't mean anything, that's what it means. Nick Fury said something very philosophical. Tony was at a loss, feeling that this black corned egg was playing with him. Don't think that you can do whatever you want with the hairstyle of a strong man. You are not the only superhero in this world. He finally said something human. Tony tilted his head and asked with some doubts, oh, then who else? Not everyone is as high profile as you. There are so-called gods in this world, such as the God King and Thor in Legendary. Nick Fury pretended to speak deeply in front of Tony, which really shocked Tony. But his first reaction was disbelief. The second reaction was to ask, do you have evidence? Definitely, but I can't show you. Nick Fury snapped back, knowing what Tony was thinking. Tony thought of the Ron he met some time ago. Does Ron also have some kind of ability? After all, Ron told him at the time that he found himself. It still made Tony remember him. Although Tony is very proud, he is not an idiot. He will still remember the kindness others have shown him. It's just that sometimes you can't let it go. You came to me to tell me about this? Tony asked after taking a sip of his drink. He can't believe that Nick Fury is just for fun. After all, the aura of the other party seems to be very complicated. No, I'm just here to check on you. Nick Fury originally wanted to invite Tony to join his Avengers plan. But after seeing Tony, he knew that Tony was extremely unreliable. So, the invitation becomes an inspection. Finish the inspection, then it's better to leave. Tony didn't even ask other questions, and just told the other party off. As the king of agents, Nick Fury naturally didn't care about these things, so he left directly. Even if he was angry, he didn't express it. God King. Thor, superhero. After confirming that the marinated egg left, Tony muttered to himself. He then activated Jarvis, ignored Jarvis's apology, and immediately said, find someone for me. Jarvis is intelligent, even though Tony knows nothing about Ron except a face. But still managed to find Ron's information. Is this information so weird? In the manor, on the extremely neatly manicured lawn, there are two figures who are still repairing it. It's like two obsessive-compulsive disorders, any grass that is not neat will be cut off mercilessly. At the same time, their mouths were chattering endlessly. And while there was a smile on his face, his eyes were extremely cold. Sister, why were there two voices in your room last night? Natasha Romanoff asked while holding the scissors. Jessica paused, and then said without any expression, how could it be? Are you hallucinating? Even if I'm deaf, I can't hear it wrong. It seems to be a little girl, right? It seems to be called Gwen. Natasha Romanoff continued with a smile on her face. Jessica didn't answer for a moment. Finally got the upper hand. The two top agents, at the moment, are like two women. The main reason is that they all think that the other party is trying to harm Ron. Natasha Romanoff also asked Ron about Jessica's background, and Ron replied that he recruited casually. After confirming that she was not the agent of the Red House, Natasha Romanoff naturally did not back down at all. At the moment she stared at Jessica closely, wanting Jessica to admit it. But Jessica laughed and said, Sister, don't talk nonsense, you must have heard it wrong. Jessica cursed secretly in her heart. It seems that I will still get the old place before. The main reason is that Gwen is very envious of her current situation. Even if it includes food and lodging, it is still such a big manor. Gwen would love to move in too. Even being a servant is fine. However, Jessica severely rejected her on the grounds of her studies. Although Gwen was helpless, there was nothing he could do. Quote. Tisk tisk. Seeing that Jessica didn't admit it, Natasha Romanoff didn't force her too much. I just hope that my sister will not mess around, even if the husband doesn't care if you are. Lily. At the end of Natasha Romanoff's speech, she said every word. This made Jessica's face look a little ugly immediately, but it quickly returned to normal like a face changing in a Sichuan opera. Was she actually suspected of being that one? Definitely. She's also not sure if Natasha Romanoff is serious, or how much she's heard. Then please don't tell my sister. She gritted her teeth and said this. Both of them looked at each other, and slowly, Quan Jia made a gesture of vigilance. However, no one took the lead. Jessica was afraid that if Natasha Romanoff went crazy and hurt others, it wasn't that she didn't have confidence in herself. After all, she doesn't want to lose this job. It will be even more difficult if the boss is injured. At this moment, a high-speed car came galloping. Laugh. The tires crazily rotated and rubbed against the ground, as if they were about to explode, but finally the car stopped. Oh, two pretty ladies, how I envy him. Seeing the two delicate beauties, Tony couldn't help feeling sour. Even if he is a famous playboy, he has never seen such a temperamental beauty. Definitely, he also knew it was Ron's woman, and didn't look much at Feng. It's you. Natasha Romanoff and Jessica returned to normal instantly, and then Jessica asked. Good. Tony smiled slightly. It seemed that everyone knew him. He sure is famous. Is there a problem? Jessica's expression didn't change. Although she has no money, she is not a gold digger, and she has no affection for Tony Stark. There is a tradition in the country of lighthouses, that is, they like to communicate and walk around with their neighbors. Great emphasis is placed on relationships with neighbors. During holidays or something, they will give each other gifts. Walk around quite frequently on weekdays. So, after Tony Stark explained his purpose of coming, Jessica let him in. Although they were all curious that this playboy would come to visit the neighbors. Tony looked at Ron, who was almost hugging him left and right, and suddenly he was extremely envious. Although he has played like Teacher Luo and is a master of time management, there is no one as harmonious as Ron. Well, he's just making up his mind. Tony was simply looking for a secretary. What? Got a chili pepper? Then add one more. Tony Stark. Ron was curious about his purpose. Hello, Ron. Tony was wearing sunglasses, and nodded his head sternly. Didn't realize you were my neighbor, so I just came over to have a look. Tony gestured with his hand, then took out a box and gave it to Ron. Jessica opened it and looked, and there was a watch inside. I dare not take what you give. Ron looked at Tony with a half-smile. Tony coughed twice in embarrassment. Don't worry, I'm not interested in men. The others immediately suppressed their smiles. Besides, you scolded me. Tony said with a smile. Did I ever scold you? Ron thought for a moment. When did I ever scold you? He looked straight at Tony. It made Tony doubt life a little bit. This is a natural actor. You know what? If you go to Hollywood, there are no other stars or nothing. Tony sneered a little, and then said, remember the last time we raced? What you said? Drag racing. You call that drag racing? Ron looked at Tony with a smile on his face. Ron sensed Tony's thick skin, remembering how Bumblebee had left Tony's sports car behind in an instant. No wonder being a playboy. In addition to being rich, he has a thick skin. Can't talk anymore. If Tony hadn't had other purposes, he would have slammed the door and left. What is his identity? When did he suffer this kind of anger? Okay, but do you remember what you said? That's just scolding me. Tony said awkwardly. I didn't scold you, because I did meet your father. Luo, CHDJ, and didn't hide it either, it's no big deal. Tony was silent, and suddenly wanted to hit someone. Have you met my father? You are not as old as me. Ron said casually. I have lived for more than 3,000 years, what do you think? Tony had nothing to say again. He wanted to refute directly, but for some reason, he believed it a little bit. Is he crazy? As for the others, except for Jessica who thought she was bragging, Natasha Romanoff and Kelly believed it. Jessica. So I'm the only one who doesn't know. Ha, are you the Protoss in Norse mythology and legendary? Tony spoke. Yes, you already know. Ron nodded, not faking it at all. Then what god are you? Lord God, Asgard will be my territory. Ron wasn't afraid of letting his ambitions out, either. Tony was finally sure now that it was a fake. So he became more and more relaxed. Started talking and laughing with Ron. For a genius like Tony, the only thing he believes in is science. Science is what he believes in most. If you want him to believe in magic and gods, you have to put them in front of him completely, otherwise he won't believe it at all. If you are a Protoss, do you have any abilities? Tony asked immediately, wanting to get Ron out of the field. Ron smiled, opened his hand, and a flame suddenly appeared in his hand. This is magic. Tony still didn't believe it. This little trick, is there anything more exciting? You'll see you later. Knowing that Tony won't believe it easily, Ron removes the fireball. He's not a joker. There's no need to try and demonstrate to Tony that there are magic and gods. When the time comes, there will always be a day when Tony will know. There was a mocking smile on Ron's lips. Tony naturally didn't know what he meant. Seeing that Ron didn't dare, he didn't stay any longer. His intention has been achieved. Nothing happened to Ron. So he left without saying a word, making Natasha Romanoff and others a little upset. It's very rude. Kelly also said something. Jessica also looked at Ron's palm, but didn't realize what was going on. And she wasn't too close just now, so she didn't know whether the fireball was real or fake. However, she is very good. Jessica suppressed her curiosity and glanced at Natasha Romanoff. Then I saw Natasha Romanoff looking normal, without any other emotions. So she frowned, realizing that things were not simple. Jessica seemed curious. Kelly whispered in Ron's ear. Definitely, but it's not like she can't accept the truth. Ron laughed. I know. Kelly nodded. As mage, she can naturally see that Jessica is not easy. Although Jessica is not mage, her strength is not as simple as her petite body seems. Jessica's body has a powerful explosive power. You do this deliberately? Kelly asked. She couldn't see it at the time, but as her strength increased, she could already see Jessica's specialness, and she naturally thought of the situation at that time. Yeah, I know who she is, otherwise how could I fall in love with her? Ron smiled and said, I'll just say it. Kelly snorted softly, but it didn't smell like jealousy, it was more like acting like a baby. Okay, I'm going out for a while. Ron patted Kelly. He can't be too happy. It's been a while since I've seen Supergiant and Dottie, and Supergiant is getting a bit dissatisfied. Even though Supergiant has lived for so long, he will always look like a girl in front of Ron. Seeing Ron coming, he threw himself on him. I thought you weren't coming back. Supergiant said with resentment. Don't we communicate often? Ron smiled wryly. He has never heard of the spiritual communication with Supergiant. I want to see you, not just to hear your voice. Supergiant snorted coldly. If you don't come here again, I'm going to find you. Ron touched her face and said nothing more. Supergiant won't agree to change skin color. Even if it's just an illusion. Dottie, is there anything wrong? Ron was asking Dottie. Dottie immediately said, recently, the Red House has a good seedling. That's her. Ron and Dottie stood in the glass room of the Red House watching the girls in training. A young girl was in their gaze. Blonde hair, the world's best figure is not lost to Natasha Romanoff. More importantly, she is also very capable. Yes, she is Yelena Belova. Dottie smiled as if asking for credit. Good. Ron squeezed her. Now Dottie's rights are all given by him, so Dottie will naturally, very obedient to him. Yelena Belova is the third generation, Black Widow. With the ability she is showing now, there is no problem at all in inheriting the title of Black Widow. Because, Yelena broke all the records left by Natasha Romanoff. It seems that she should be the best Black Widow. After another look, Yelena at the moment is still very young. Ron decided to wait for her to grow up. Don't let that happen to Natasha Romanoff again. Ron said to Dottie. Don't worry, it won't happen. Dottie looked straight and made a promise. Ron was just saying it casually. Well, she's just like you. Dottie froze for a moment, and immediately understood the sentence. Let Yelena be as special as she is with Natasha Romanoff, and not accept the final makeover of the Red House. Dottie took a deep look at Yelena's figure and knew what to do. All she has to do is please Ron. Sir, Tony Stark invited you to his party. It's been a few days since Tony's visit. Jessica swayed in and said. It's not that she did it on purpose, but that's how she walks. Ron naturally didn't mind admiring it. Ron took the invitation. People in Lighthouse Country love to party. There's even a party animal that goes to parties basically every day of the week. However, this was the first time Tony Stark had invited him to a party. Tony originally rarely held. In the past, he would hold parties to pursue girls, but now he basically puts his heart and soul into Iron Wars. So when Ron thought about it, he knew what was going on. Tony Palladium was poisoned. Ron chuckled and said, let's go then. Jessica nodded, and didn't ask who was the female companion. Who else but Kelly? Although she has also been a housekeeper for a few months, she has no personal relationship with Ron. And she also felt somewhat abnormal here. It looks like a bumblebee with artificial intelligence. Once Carrie saw it transformed and went to watch TV. And Carrie, who sits cross-legged every day, also looks weird. So, Jessica knew something was wrong here. But for the sake of such a good job, she didn't show it. People need to eat. Besides, she is also a Spider-Woman herself, and she has to go out to fight for justice every night. The sun sets soon, as if I couldn't bear to stay in the sky for a while. As night falls, this big city begins to glow with its unique charm. During the day, everyone is a worker. By night it was all liberated. Parties, bars, people everywhere. And Carrie didn't want to go to the party, so Natasha Romanoff had to do it for her. Natasha Romanoff also dressed up well. As a Black Widow, she put on a long black dress with a little silver on it, and red black high heels on her feet, and opened her brown hair behind her. When Ron saw Natasha Romanoff appearing in front of his eyes lit up. Then he hugged her directly. Let's go when you're ready. He said calmly, but felt the warmth of the tip of his hand. Really fragrant. And at this time, a charming smile appeared on Natasha Romanoff's face. I was originally an agent, and I was well trained in this area. If she couldn't control her fear in front of Ron, she would be a good communicator everywhere. Holding Natasha Romanoff all the way onto the Hornet, Ron was still a little reluctant to put his hands on the steering wheel. As expected, the most excellent Black Widow is the most excellent in every aspect. After comparing Natasha Romanoff to Dottie, Ron thought. Bumblebee soon took the two to Tony's mansion in New York. Ron remembered that this scene should be on the coast of Los Angeles, but now it has changed. I don't know why. Maybe Tony didn't want to go to Los Angeles. When Ron brought Natasha Romanoff into the arena, it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Men and women are beautiful, and Natasha Romanoff's Deadman's smile. Although, most people here don't know them. The party had clearly begun, with blaring music and an untold number of writhing people. That's why Ron doesn't like parties very much, it's too loud and messy. And so many people, most of them don't know each other. It goes without saying what the party is obviously. It's just an occasion to create opportunities for people who don't know each other. As for where to go, it depends on your own ability. Ron and Natasha Romanoff didn't bother to move over either, and each took a glass of wine. Then Ron put his arms around Natasha Romanoff. This is an opportunity that I never had at home. Ron felt a slight stiffness in her. Not used to it? Ron asked with a smile. No, it's just. Natasha Romanoff didn't say a word, and was led by Ron to jump up slowly. Both of them held their wine glasses, looking for a chance to have a sip from time to time. They looked very beautiful. A dance is quick. Natasha Romanoff let out a sigh, took Ron's arm and followed him to the side. Then she turned down everyone who asked her to dance. Isn't that the Playboy's secretary? Natasha Romanoff whispered in Ron's ear. Ron followed her gaze as well, just in time to see Pepper looking jealously at that Playboy Tony. Sure enough, my nature doesn't change. After seeing the situation, Natasha Romanoff also muttered, but soon stopped talking. Because she recognized each other. At the moment, Tony was erratically holding a blonde woman in his arms and playing with the palm cannon on his steel armor. The woman has a good figure and looks like an agent. Ron glanced at Natasha Romanoff. You know her? Yes, her name is Barbara Morse, codename Mockingjay. Natasha Romanoff continued to whisper in Ron's ear, exposing the other party's details. It turned out to be Mockingjay. Ron was also slightly surprised. It soon became clear why Barbara was by Tony's side. Obviously, this should have been the task of Natasha Romanoff, but Natasha Romanoff was abducted by him. Nick Fury had no choice but to let Mockingjay Barbara come. Fortunately, it's all the same for Tony. As long as it looks good. And the reality is also true. Tony was so fascinated by Barbara that he didn't even see the jealous Pepper. He obviously saw Pepper, but chose Barbara instead. But he didn't ignore the little Pepper all the time, and asked the little Pepper to help him get the wine. Pepper resisted the urge to slap Tony, turned and left. No way, this is the life of a worker. Hey, my magician friend. At this time, Tony finally saw Ron, and came over to hug, but was directly separated by Ron. It's too embarrassing, Tony complained in his heart, but he didn't care. Just pretending to be enthusiastic. The only friends he really recognizes are those with knowledge. For example, Bruce Banner later, his knowledge was recognized by Tony. And like Thor and Steve, who can only fight, Tony doesn't really care much about it. Although they are all friends, the weight is different. Hello. Barbara, who followed Tony, also pretended not to know the two of them. Actually, she took a look at Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff also looked at her and greeted her calmly. In terms of acting skills, agents are much better than actors. After all, actors know that they are filming, and agents have to show their acting skills all the time. Therefore, it takes a huge amount of money to cultivate an excellent agent. How are you doing? Tony asked, taking the drink Pepper gave him. It's not bad, but it's a pity that some people can't do it. Ron nodded, then shook his head and sighed. What's the meaning? Tony asked. I said you were dying, can't you hear me? Ron also slapped him directly. Pepper gave Ron a dissatisfied look, but Tony's expression changed. No one knows his situation better than him. But now Ron could tell at a glance that he was dying. Definitely, it can't be ruled out that Ron is trying to annoy him on purpose. So Tony asked cautiously, what are you talking about? Palladium poisoning, Ron said casually. The elements of the human body cannot be changed. Changes are happening inside your body. Palladium poisoning is not good, Tony. Tony was finally sure Ron saw it. How could you possibly know? He asked in shock. Not only I know, but many people know. Ron glanced at Barbara. Tony then dragged Ron into his basement. Little Pepper finally knew something was wrong. From the looks of it, Tony really seemed to have something to do. Little Pepper had a cold face, but the concern on his face could be seen at a glance. Well, she's conflicted. A group of people came to Tony's underground studio and needed Tony's fingerprint information to enter. Can you heal me? Tony looked at Ron seriously, his eyes full of expectation. After all, even if he is a genius, there is no way to solve this problem. That's why he gave up on himself a little bit, held this party, and prepared to have a good time before he died. Barbara at the moment gave Natasha Romanoff frantic winks, as if trying to get her to stop Ron. Natasha Romanoff shook her head at her, anxious Barbara couldn't do it. S.H.I.E.L.D. made Tony feel this death god approaching on purpose. At that time, S.H.I.E.L.D. will take out the things in his hands, cure Tony's calcium poisoning in a short time, and then give the relics left by his father. In this way, Tony can owe a lot of favor to S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury is like an old fox, playing his calculations loudly. Unexpectedly, Ron came out, directly disrupting S.H.I.E.L.D.'s plan. So Barbara was in a hurry. But it's useless for her to be anxious, unless she reveals her identity now. These exchanges were fleeting, and Natasha Romanoff ignored Barbara. She has nothing to do with S.H.I.E.L.D. now. Only for Ron. I can do it casually, but why should I help you? Ron drank the wine in his hand, and then put the glass heavily on the table. You are Tony Stark and I help you. Therefore, Ron still acted like it was none of his business. But Tony wasn't angry, instead he was pleasantly surprised. It seems normal to him to pay a price for everything. After all, in addition to his title of genius scientist, he is also a businessman. I can give you whatever you want, money? Tony asked. Ron, I'm not interested in money, and the only thing I regret now is that I have so much money. Hearing Ron's pretense, Tony was speechless. He didn't even bother to say such a thing. But after thinking about Ron's big manner, it seems that the other party is really not short of money. Beauty. So, he asked with bright eyes. After all, Ron is a beautiful woman in the Golden House, and the three in the manor are all beauties. But that's met with a death stare from Natasha Romanoff. She didn't know why she had such thoughts. Actually, I'm face blind, and I can't tell the difference between beauty and ugliness. Ron shook his head again, regretful. Tony nearly vomited blood. Are you a liar? None of the girls around you are ugly, yet they say that they are face blind and can't tell the difference between Métienne. Then what do you want? Tony finally asked impatiently and helplessly. To be honest, you don't have what I want, but I simply decided to help you because I saw some people were upset. Ron smiled slightly. Make S.H.I.E.L.D. feel bad, and make him feel good. For some reason, Ron just doesn't like the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization. It may be that Nick Fury's shape is not good, but he has to learn from Odin's one-eyed. He just wore sunglasses, and Ron wouldn't say anything. But he still wears a blindfold, as if to let everyone know that he is one-eyed. Nick Fury sure didn't know that was the reason. Otherwise he would rather be a blind man. Ron put his hands in front of Tony, and made a grabbing motion. Afterwards, Tony trembled all over. Ah! Tony cried out in pain. He felt that fluid was pouring up from his body. As if it was about to be squeezed out of his chest. Tony, although Little Pepper didn't know what happened, he more or less guessed it. So at the moment just exclaims, but no other action. Barbara also looked at Tony with a worried expression. She was afraid that something would happen to Tony. She didn't know who Ron was after all. Nick Fury wouldn't have told her before either. Fortunately, Tony's trembling didn't last long. Soon a group of silver palladium elements were pulled out from Tony's body, and then gathered into a metal shape in the air. Ha! Tony gasped, gulping in the fresh air. It was only such a short period of time, but it seemed to him that a century had passed. He felt like he was being cramped and skinned. Never want to suffer again. While wiping his sweat, Tony asked, is everything going to be fine from now on? Unless you don't use this thing anymore. Ron tapped on his reactor. Tony said regretfully, it seems that we still have to find new elements. I think someone will be looking for you soon. Ron looked at Barbara with a smile. Barbara looked at Ron helplessly. All plans were disrupted by him. Brother, I owe you my life. Tony wanted to give Ron a hug decisively, but was rejected again ugly. Fortunately, Tony didn't care, but said very seriously, maybe I should apologize to you, but I won't apologize. Playboy still has this personality, and it is almost impossible for him to apologize. I won't say it's magic next time, it's magic, right? Ron didn't say anything, just patted him on the shoulder and left. He didn't like Tony very much. Proud Tony looks nice, but you can't stand being friends with him. Just like Ron would never be friends with Batman. That dark guy, while befriending you, is thinking about how to deal with you. Who can stand this? So what he did was just to discuss S.H.I.E.L.D. For him it's just a game. Sure enough, after the party, Nick Fury found Tony. Then started a relationship with Tony. Your father was once the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D. When Tony heard this, his eyes widened. Why don't I know? All he had was this question. Maybe he doesn't care about this S.H.I.E.L.D. Although it changed a simple name. For some reason, he wants to protect you. Your father left something at S.H.I.E.L.D. that might help you. Nick Fury was bitter, but he didn't say it. This is the only way to build a relationship with Tony. It was originally a life-saving grace, but it was destroyed by Ron. Now he can only quickly take out the things and let Tony study them. Definitely. Tony raised an eyebrow, then glanced at Barbara. He didn't like Barbara now. Because he was cheated. He can deceive women, but women cannot deceive him. Soon, Tony was driving his own sports car, dragging his father's relics to research. Successful sign-in, continuous sign-in for 3,110 years, and reward, 4 magic guns. 4 magic guns. These are the exclusive weapons of the Angel Witch Bayonetta. 4 famous guns made by Rodan, a famous craftsman in the Devil world, are named Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme. You can use the witch. The strength of the machine can be brought to the limit, not only for shooting, but also for the ability to strike. Ron looked at the 4 magic guns floating in the air, and was also a little speechless. He's not a witch. So, Ron just dumped them on Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff is an agent, and it's easy to put 4 guns on him. Although not like Bayonetta, there are 2 on both feet. Natasha Romanoff also found these 4 guns very interesting, and fell in love with them after using them for a while. After leaving Tony's villa, Ron left him alone. I just know roughly that he has already defeated the Polar Bear Man. He was watching Kelly's cultivation now, and the dark energy in Kelly's body became more and more intense. Because she, like GU, can absorb the power of the dark dimension. And because of Dormammu, Kelly doesn't have those side effects. It was also the reason why even if Dormammu did something to her, he could only expel Carrie. Definitely, maybe also because there is a little family affection in it. He's calling me again. Kelly opened her eyes, and said helplessly to Ron. According to her communication with Dormammu, she should have returned to the dark dimension long ago. But now it has been relying on the earth and not leaving. If it weren't for the 3 holy places on the earth and the existence of the Supreme Mage, the dark dimension would have swallowed the earth long ago. Definitely, even if Carrie goes back, this cannot be changed. Dormammu's thoughts on earth have always been there. Supreme Mage appeared to deal with these existences. Even so, Dormammu's magic in summoning Carrie is getting heavier. Kelly was terrified that she would not be able to stand it. Don't worry, at worst, I'll beat him up. Ron smiled at Kelly. Kelly widened Ron. He has already transcended time, and your trick will not work on him. Although Kelly didn't know how Ron reversed time. But that obviously doesn't work on Dormammu. Because Dormammu is out of time. Who said that? Ron shook his head. Even annoyance can annoy Dormammu to death. Also, he didn't want to bother Dormammu. Since he said he was going to be beaten, it was naturally a violent beating. After all, he himself doesn't know how strong he is. Perhaps he has reached the point where he can blow out the sun with one breath. Moreover, he is also a dual cultivator of magic and martial arts. In addition to his body, he also has magical attainments comparable to that of a Dharma god. But it's all fake if you haven't played. I'm afraid that he will call me forcibly now. Don't worry, it's not that easy. Ron comforted Kelly, and soon the comfort went elsewhere. Night fell. Natasha Romanoff was a bit surprised that dinner was ready and no one came down to eat, but she didn't mind. And Jessica was clearly guessing what was going on. Both are playing dumb. The confrontation between the 2 did not stop. It's like one mountain cannot contain 2 tigers, even if it's 1 male and 1 female. What's more, both of them are women, and both are very strong agents, even though Jessica has already transformed. It wasn't until the trembling Kelly came down that they stopped their confrontation, with harmonious smiles on their faces. Then, both of them set their eyes on Kelly. Kelly didn't feel any embarrassment, and ate with a calm expression. Ron waited for a while before coming down. The atmosphere is a little weird. Neither Natasha Romanoff nor Jessica seemed to have very high appetites. Looking at the two with weird expressions, Ron didn't know what happened. Boom. Just as Ron was about to say something, there was another explosion in downtown New York. Moreover, not far from the rich area, the shock of the explosion spread here. Soon there was the sound of helicopter paddling in the sky. What happened? Both Natasha Romanoff and Jessica stood up from the dinner table with vigilant expressions. Ron watched the fireworks explode in the distance. It could be an art, he said casually. Everyone else looked like you were kidding me. Apparently none of them knew Michael Bay, the demolition genius. But for men, isn't art just a blast? Wow. Soon, the voices of the police and the army resounded throughout New York City. I'm done eating, I want to go to rest first. Jessica put down the fork in her hand and said. Aren't you going to have a look? Natasha Romanoff smiled at her. No, I'm not feeling well. Jessica glared at Natasha Romanoff, then went upstairs decisively. Ron also shook his head, and said to the two, let's go and have a look. As the bumblebee roared out, a figure in a red tights floated out of the manor. Soon, they arrived at the avenue. What kind of creature is this? Seeing the ugly thing several meters high on the street, Kelly immediately asked. But she didn't seem too excited, and even Natasha Romanoff didn't waver. All three are well-informed people. Carrie has even seen the original residents in the dark dimension. The monster's body is full of swollen muscles, and there are a few spikes on its head. Definitely, the main thing is that its skin turns the color of dust. All of them add up to be extremely ugly. That's why Kelly asked this question, it's really ugly. It looks like a villain. Ron thought for a moment and knew what it was. Hate. After Bronski forcibly accepted the transformation, he integrated the blood of Dr. Bruce Banner, and it turned into this appearance. This is still the responsibility of the Green Titan. If it wasn't for the Green Titan beating him up violently, he would never have thought of injecting the Green Titan's blood. At the moment, huge amounts of Abomination directly raised the car in his hand, and smashed it towards the military vehicle next to him. Boom. The collision of the two cars directly caused the explosion. This is why there are so many artistic voices. Obviously, people in New York liked this art very much, and many people took pictures from a distance. The bumblebee stopped in the distance, and several people got out of the car to observe. At the moment, countless military personnel have arrived. The reason is simple. This is New York, and the avenue is close to the affluent. The wealthy group is definitely the most greedy and fearful group of people in the Beacon Country. They have countless wealth, so they don't want to put their lives on it. Coupled with the huge losses that this may cause, the army's response cannot be described as unpleasant. However, with these conventional weapons, hitting the Abomination is like scratching an itch. Hate even made a cameo appearance of a war wolf, facing the flying RPG missiles. He held it directly in his hand. Boom. The RPG exploded in an instant, but when the smoke dissipated, the Abomination didn't have any scars at all. Bang, bang. Its powerful force directly left two footprints on the ground, and then with one leap, it overturned a light tank. Hulk. The hatred roared up to the sky, and tore down the long pipe of the tank with all its strength. Provocation. This is provocation. Dr. Bruce Banner in the sky couldn't help it. Even if Bronski turned into hatred, he did not give up his resentment towards him. So, Dr. Banner chose the easiest answer. That is to fight. He jumped straight out of the plane and turned into a Green Titan before landing. Hulk was a little dissatisfied, looking for death every time. The appearance of the two big guys immediately sublimated this art. Wow, what a monster. There are actually two monsters. My God, is this the result of a biological experiment? It must be a product of the military. These guys, doing this kind of oppression on our taxpayers' money. The exclamation and discussion of the people came from the ear. Ron watched the duel between the two hunks. It's not as earth-shattering as he imagined. It seems that the Green Titan Hulk was almost crushed and beaten by the Abomination because of excessive blood draw. Boom. Hate punched Hulk in the face, making Hulk take a few steps back. Then it rushed up again, directly hitting Hulk into the air. Puff. Hulk's body caused huge amounts of damage to the ground, and a huge drag mark appeared. After finally getting up from the ground, he was beaten into the air again. Hulk finally behaved and knew the devious tactics. He easily jumped onto the walls of the surrounding houses, and then kept climbing. Abomination definitely won't watch him flee. At the same time, with a bit of reminiscence loathing, he began to provoke Hulk. Hulk was extremely aggrieved. If it wasn't for Bruce Banner's idiot drawing too much blood, how could his invincible Hulk not be able to defeat mere Abomination? This monster that integrated its own blood is simply ridiculous. The Abomination caught up to Hulk, grabbed Hulk's ankles, and threw him to the ground. Boom! Hulk slammed into the ground hard, and it was painful to watch. This kind of damage will cost a lot of money to repair. Then, like an MMA fighter, the Abomination jumped off the house and smashed towards the Hulk in the big pit. However, in midair, a voice floated over. "Go away, monster." With a soft shout, a person wearing a black tights kicked the Abomination directly into the air. Then, another woman in a red tights caught the Abomination in the air, and then slammed it hard, smashing it into the ground. Boom! Another huge amounts of big pit. The dust flying around caused many onlookers to retreat. That's exactly what Spider-Woman Jessica and Ghost Spider-Gwen are. Originally, everyone was just watching the battle, but they didn't expect the Green Titan to be so unbeatable, so naturally they had to stand up. Because Spider-Man has mutated, Jessica and Gwen are both very powerful, so the Abomination was blown away. Abomination shook his head and stood up, only to see Jessica flip and land on Abomination's head. She bound the head of the Abomination with a cobweb as if she were riding a mount. "Big man, get up quickly." Gwen patted Hulk, and Hulk finally stood up. "Hulk," he yelled "de nuo Jiao," and then rushed towards Abomination. And Jessica managed to barely control her hatred and rushed towards the Green Titan Hulk. The two huge amounts of monsters were like strong rhinoceros, their heads collided directly. Boom! With this power, Jessica quickly got away from the Abomination. Hulk and Hate smashed their heads into each other's faces, and then punched each other with their fists without the slightest pause. Natasha Romanoff at the moment looked at the figure of Red and said, "Why do you feel a little familiar?" Kelly glanced at Natasha Romanoff, but said nothing. Because she has recognized each other. Magic Mage has its own unique identification method. And Jessica's dress is too carefree. Just put on a blindfold and change your makeup. But is it true that people who know her don't recognize her? Even Batman knows how to cover half of his face, leaving only one mouth outside. Without a doubt, Hulk was knocked back with another punch. It was as if he had been hit by a halo of weakness, his whole body was weak, and he was beaten back and forth by the hatred. Therefore, Jessica and Gwen had to keep helping. Fortunately, Hulk helped them attract hatred, otherwise they would not be hated opponents. After all, the hatred at the moment can beat the Green Titan to the ground, so its strength is not very bad. "Please stay away." At this moment, someone finally came to fend off the onlookers. And they didn't even let them get close to watch. Even everyone was ordered to leave. "Don't you need to help?" Natasha Romanoff asked Ron the two of them. "Do you have a way?" Facing the inquiry, Natasha Romanoff went directly to negotiate, and then they came in smoothly. "I still have the FBI medal in my hand," Natasha Romanoff said with a smile. "Not only the FBI, but she also has them from the Bureau of Mapping. That's what SHIELD means. After all, SHIELD has always been hidden behind the scenes, so most of the scapegoats have been blamed by the FBI. Are you going to make a move?" Kelly asked Ron. "No, it's too weak." Ron shook his head. Hate is really not enough to watch. Moreover, under the siege of so many people in the field, the hatred has already fallen into a disadvantage. Jessica and Gwen's cobweb worked well as cover. Although they couldn't do any harm to the Abomination, they sprayed it precisely on the eyes of the Abomination. Hate opened his eyes, only to see a white light. It struggled to tear it apart with its hands, and then rushed forward like a mad bull. "Bumblebee, stop it." Seeing the location of the Abomination, Ron immediately said to the Bumblebee. "Yes, Master." The electronic sound of the Bumblebee sounded, and the transformation was completed in just 2 seconds. This is the first time Natasha Romanoff has seen Bumblebee transform. Isn't this artificial intelligence? The thought came to her mind, and she saw the Hornet jump out. Not to mention, Bumblebee's cute appearance captured the women present in an instant. Boom! Bumblebee raised the cannon in his hand, and then fired at the Abomination. Hate's eyes couldn't see ahead, so he could only be hit in the face by the cannonball, and retreated back. Afterwards, the Hornet directly grabbed the iron chain on the side, and rushed towards the Abomination like a big man. Snapped. The iron chain was drawn on Abomination, but Abomination didn't feel much. Although Bumblebee is a Cybertronian, the gap between him and Abomination is too great. And looking at the size after getting closer, Ron was worried that the Hornet would be torn down by the Abomination. Because the Abomination is a head taller than the Bumblebee. After all, the Bumblebee is only the file size of a normal Camaro, and it is only a little taller after the transformation. Moreover, the defense of the Abomination is higher than that of the Autobots. Perhaps, only a leader like Optimus Prime can compare his height with Abomination. Hate punched the Hornet. The Bumblebee was fairly dexterous, and the moment it evaded the attack with a clever slide, it also came behind the Abomination. Crack! The iron chain directly wrapped around the neck of the Abomination, and then the Hornet kicked the Abomination to the ground. Hey big man, you're no match for Bumblebee. Bumblebee's proud electronic voice made Gwen smile. But Jessica kept her face sullen. The Bumblebee actually appeared, so isn't Mr. Ron and the others also there? Jessica tried to keep herself calm and didn't want others to find out the abnormality. However, the huge power of hatred directly knocked the Bumblebee away. Boom! The Bumblebee hit the ground as soon as he finished speaking harshly. But just when the Abomination wanted to continue to resist, Hulk arrived. He grabbed Bumblebee's chains straight away and hanged the Abomination. Bah! Crack! The iron chain is constantly locked, and the huge amounts of head of the Abomination have also undergone some changes. It wanted to reach out and grab the iron chain, but it was in vain. Ho, chdh, ho ho. The loathing roared unwillingly. He just wanted to fight a Green Titan, but he didn't expect so many enemies to jump out all at once. After it yelled for a while, the sound gradually became smaller until there was no sound at all. But even so, no one dared to approach. People in the military are pointing weapons at Hulk. Hulk dropped the chain casually, and the loathsome body fell to the ground immediately. Then, Hulk wanted to run away. Coincidentally, he also chose the direction of Ron. If they don't get out of the way, they will be hit by the Hulk. Although the Hulk will leap away, they are not happy. Hulk roared, sending out a strong emotion to get out of the way. I'll give you a ride. Ron said something casually. Then his body appeared behind Hulk in an instant, followed by a kick. Just like playing football, Hulk's huge amounts of body flew out directly. Boom! The huge sound from the field made everyone watch all this. And raised a question. Ron's leg, isn't it broken? When the sound dissipated, everyone surrounded them, but these soldiers did not dare to shoot. Tell your men to go away. Natasha Romanoff is very good at handling this kind of thing, and once her identity is revealed, the countryside is in trouble. Bumblebee obediently changed back to the shape of a car. Let's go. The door opened and Ron stepped up. You guys come too. This was addressed to Jessica and Gwen. Gwen poked Jessica with her finger and asked, Jessica, what should I do? Only then did Jessica come to her senses. Although she knew that the boss was not easy, she never thought that this would be the case. That big guy was kicked away just like that. This made her feel suspicious of life, so she froze for a long time. Then, she guessed that her identity had been spotted, so she took Gwen into the car obediently. Although it was a bit cramped for 5 people, Bumblebee quickly completed the shapeshifting. After scanning an off-road vehicle casually, the space suddenly became larger. Wow! Gwen groaned, then closed her mouth. The atmosphere in the car was somewhat dignified, and no one spoke first. And just after they left, Tony Stark, who came over slowly, made a soy sauce. No way, he has already returned to Los Angeles, and he also saw the situation from the news, and the group flew over. Who would have thought that it would be over by the time he arrived? However, he also figured out the cause and effect. General Ross is the culprit. So, after Tony landed, he was going to talk to General Ross directly. As for the disaster on the scene, naturally someone will clean up. This is why everyone fled immediately. This matter is far from over, and even the sky-high maintenance fee is enough to cause headaches for a long time. Chapter 91. The Shield building in New York is brightly lit even at night. Especially in the director's office on the highest floor, the lights are turned on to the maximum. Otherwise Nick Fury's ability would make him less obvious. At the moment, several people stared wide-eyed. Nick Fury has taken a fancy to the Green Titan. He thinks that the Green Titan is so powerful that he can become a member of the Avengers Alliance. At the same time, I was also thinking about the strength that Ron and the others showed. Got it, these two people are called Spider-Woman and Ghost Spider-Man, and they are both superheroes who often appear in New York. Maria Hill spoke to Fury with the report. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been paying attention to them for a long time, but they didn't pay much attention before. Because Nick Fury didn't have that much worry before, he didn't know that human beings might have so many enemies in the universe. Do you have their real identities? Nick Fury looked at it for a while, then asked with a frown. He didn't even know his true identity and personality, which made him unable to make a decision. No, Hill Agent shook his head and said. S.H.I.E.L.D. is not omnipotent either. Although it claims to know everything, there are still things it does not know. However, characters should also be regarded as being brave in righteousness. That's not enough. Nick Fury immediately shook his head and put the information aside. Even Tony Stark, he went to see it himself. How can others be sloppy? This big guy can do it. He looked at the picture of the Green Titan and said. Detailed information about Dr. Bruce Banner is in his hands. Dr. Banner is originally the top talent, with 7 doctorates in length. And his personality is not as arrogant and difficult as Tony's, but very peaceful. The only thing that bothered him was that the transformed Hulk seemed out of control. But the huge amounts of destructive power also allowed him to accept this shortcoming. However, even Hulk, who seemed so powerful, was beaten away by Ron, an unknown god. If everyone was as strong as Ron, the Earth wouldn't have to resist. Honestly, accept the rule of Asgard and be done. If it wasn't for Elliot's pure Asgard reference, Fury probably would have given up. Stepping across the neatly manicured lawn without a single weed, when everyone came to the quiet manor, the night was filled with a sense of hustle and bustle. The light made Gwen breathe a sigh of relief, and the atmosphere was not so depressing. Sometimes the color tone feels very different. Then, she sat down on the chair obediently. At first I wanted to take off the hood on my head, but I immediately reacted and put my hand down. Then Gwen gave Ron a nervous look. This Jessica's boss, the owner of this manor that made her sour with envy. Looks, not as serious as Jessica makes it out to be. The silver-haired woman and the red-haired woman looked at them curiously, with scrutiny in their eyes. Jessica next to her was visibly nervous, and Gwen knew why she was nervous. After all, she was afraid of her identity being exposed. Jessica, your attire does not have any effect on concealing your identity. Ron spoke first. Jessica, who was still praying, took a deep breath, and then decisively took off the blindfold. She knew that she had been discovered, so naturally she would not make unnecessary excuses. Because it doesn't work, it's better to admit it generously, and everyone won't be embarrassed. Natasha Romanoff looked exactly like you, with a smile in it. Then, he looked at Gwen in surprise. Why did you take off the hood? Jessica said to Gwen speechlessly. Ah, silly. Gwen put the hood back on. Everyone found that the girl was a little innocent. In fact, Ron found out the first time, because when he pretended to be Batman, Gwen invited him to form a team. Obviously the styles are different. A dark person like Batman will team up with you. Everyone looked at Gwen with eyes where IQ was being played with. Is it uncomfortable to wear a hood? Ron asked again. Uncomfortable, Gwen hummed. Kelly smiled. This Gwen is too cute. If you don't take it off, we've all seen you. Hearing Kelly's words, he looked at Jessica with a slight hesitation. Jessica nodded before she took off the hood. Gwen has short gold hair, a small cut, 3-dimensional facial features, and an upturned nose. As for Jessica, with her long black and straight hair, is it confirmed that she can hide her identity? If you want to hide your identity, you have to cut your hair. What's the use of wearing a blindfold? Ron complained again. Every time I see Jessica's outfit, she doesn't feel like a Spider-Man. Serious Spider-Man who doesn't wear a hood. Gwen also wore a hoodie and a sweater hat. As for Jessica, she can't wear her long black hair, nor does she wear a mask, just cover her eyes. Isn't this deceiving oneself and deceiving others? I don't cut it. Jessica was clearly emotional about her hair and shook her head immediately. Naturally, everyone would not force her to cut it off. Just a little rant. Natasha Romanoff said with a smile. My sister's IQ is really worrying. Jessica glared at Natasha Romanoff, then said to Ron, Mr. Ron, I'm moving out immediately. Why move away? Ron asked in surprise. Didn't you mean that? Jessica asked back. She thought Ron had brought her to the opposite court just to get her to leave. I'm just bringing you back, lest you encounter accidents, and also, to figure it out. Ron pointed to Jessica and Gwen. We all recognize you. If you don't make it clear, there will be misunderstandings. Hearing Ron's words, the two also nodded. Jessica naturally didn't mention the matter of leaving. It was not easy to find such a good job, which is rare in the lighthouse country. The lighthouse country is a place where classes are dead, in other words, there is no way to rise. Even if Jessica is a very powerful agent, if she doesn't join those hidden organizations, she has no chance. Common people's destiny is to work for the top people. Gwen on the side asked in surprise, Can I move in? Gwen. Jessica glared at her, and Gwen shrank her neck suddenly. Jessica could only look at Ron. Ron is the head of the family after all. It doesn't need Ron to establish authority, they all understand. Definitely yes, there are a lot of vacant houses here, and you don't have to be separated from Jessica at night, it's dangerous. Ron was sweet, which put a smile on Gwen's face. Thanks, sir, you are a very good man. Gwen immediately sent Ron a good guy card. Okay, tell me about your situation. Ron took Gwen's good friend card, then pointed to the two and asked. Jessica was silent for a moment and then said, I was born in the United States when the sun never sets. I used to be an agent. Later, I decided to leave Hydra, so I came to New York and returned to the life of common. It's really quite common, so it's okay to go against gold. I found Gwen by accident, she has the same ability as me. Gwen nodded too. It is easy for Spider-Man to find the same kind, and spider telepathy will issue a warning. Regarding this point, several people did not ask much. We are not very curious people. I'm just guessing what abilities they have. And thinking of the battle tonight, the two were swinging around on the roof and the walls, and they could stick to them and run. Seems like a total violation of physics. Okay, 653, let's not talk about this, let's go get Gwen to get acquainted. Ron said to Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff immediately stood up and smiled, Gwen, bandit. Gwen naturally followed, and because of Natasha Romanoff's kindness, she also felt that Natasha Romanoff was very good. Sir, why are you? Jessica still couldn't help asking. That one from Ron made her doubt life. Didn't I tell you? Ron said to her. Jessica suddenly remembered the situation when Tony Stark came over. What Ron said was still vivid in her memory. Is it possible that it is all true? Lived for more than 3,000 years. This night, everyone has complicated thoughts. Ron noticed that except for Carrie, no one else seemed to be able to sleep. Kelly is well informed about everything, and is not too curious about these things. But others have not lived through Carrie's experience. Carrie has been to various worlds, and her status as Dormammu's niece allows her to run amok in many places. Dimension Mephisto's reputation is no joke. Even Ancient One didn't do anything to her. Otherwise, Ancient One would have driven her out of the earth long ago. But the other three have different ideas. Especially Gwen, who just moved in, kept bouncing up and down. The next day, Gwen, why didn't you turn into a panda all night? Ron looked at Gwen, who was staring at the dark circles under his eyes, and laughed. He definitely knows why. What is a panda? Gwen froze for a moment. Oh, it's that cute animal. That's right, Ron nodded. Pandas are indeed cute, but also very strong at the same time. Anyway, it is also a bear. Do I really look alike? Gwen still didn't understand the stock. Your eyes are very similar. Ron said, and gave Gwen a mirror. Gwen snorted suddenly. Then she hurried to paint her own eye makeup. Ron came to the lobby, seemingly unattended for a while. Everyone has been a little busy these 2 days, especially last night when I was going to take care of it, but I went out. So Ron waved. Cleansing. All the dust flew out by itself, and the glass was as clean as if it had been wiped several times. In just 10 seconds, the entire hall was completely new. Small tidying technique. Ron waved again, and all the furniture and daily necessities moved by themselves. It was as if there were pairs of invisible hands restoring them. Moreover, there is still the kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder. After 2 simple spells, the manor was as clean as if no one had ever lived in it. Ron sighed again. Mages are slackers. This spell was created specifically for laziness. He could imagine what Merlin looked like in ordinary times. Long beard, staring at the big dark circles under the eyes. I don't know how long I haven't changed the mage robe on my body. No way, these spells are all in Merlin's magic book. Kamar Taj seems to have to clean up herself. At the moment, Jessica and Natasha Romanoff were just in time to see the refreshed manor. Why, sir, you have this kind of spell, and you want us to clean it? Jessica couldn't help asking aggrievedly. Although Natasha Romanoff didn't speak, her look said it all. She is also very wrong. Otherwise, why should I spend money to hire you? Ron said confidently. He is very familiar with the trick of turning the customer into the main. And Jessica and Natasha Romanoff stopped talking. I just thought it made sense. And if you really let them relax, they can't stay idle. If it was really a fat house, Jessica wouldn't go out every day to be a superhero. The greater the so-called ability, the greater the responsibility. This is what every Spider-Man knows. Where's Gwen? So, Jessica asked. I'm going to call her. As she said that, she turned and went upstairs and grabbed Gwen, who was doing eye makeup. I'm going to move things. After finishing breakfast, Gwen said anxiously. But her car is not here. Let the Hornet take you there. Ron said to Gwen. Gwen nodded quickly. She hadn't driven a fancy car like the Bumblebee yet. Definitely, it doesn't matter whether the Hornet will let her drive or not. Maybe the Hornet just took over the steering wheel. Gwen went out fast and came back fast. After taking his own things, he drove back in his second-hand Ford. People in Lighthouse Country love cars very much, and cars are their second home. Moreover, the people in the Lighthouse Country depend on cars to a great extent, which is beyond people's imagination. That's why movies like Shapeshifting King Kong can arouse the popularity of Americans. People like Gwen who have reached the driving age after the age of 16 will immediately learn the driver's license and then buy their own car. Definitely, young people are generally used cars. Bumblebee is so cool. As soon as she jumped out of the car, Gwen yelled, holding her stuff. Her strength is incomparable, and it's like nothing if a few bags are piled up on her body. Coupled with her petite figure, Natasha Romanoff doubts life. Thanks for the compliment, you're great too, Gwen. Bumblebee's electronic voice said. The Hornet is definitely the most pleasing car people. Whether it is a man or a woman, everyone wants to have a car partner like Bumblebee. Definitely, that doesn't preclude it from being originally cute. Gwen, don't you have to go to class today? At this time, Jessica asked leisurely. Gwen's joyful mood instantly became empty. Fortunately, thanks to happy education, they don't have much time for class. Definitely, under this kind of education mode, all kinds of anti-intellectual talents come out basically. For example, believe that the earth is not round, but square. In the Lighthouse Country, this kind of talent is not uncommon. Next, there was another person in Ron's manor, and Gwen brought a smile here. After all, no one can feel resentment towards such a lovely girl as her. Ron felt that he had become a Spider-Man. The 9 realms are still the same, running around the branches of the world tree. From a distance, it seems that the 9 realms will never change. At least if Ron could tell, he wouldn't be able to see any difference from what it was 3,000 years ago. Life is not easy for the Frost Titans in Jotunheim. After being defeated by Asgard twice, especially 1,000 years ago, the treasure casket of ancient winters was taken away by Odin and stored in the treasury. The Frost Titan completely lost the capital to fight against Asgard. Therefore, even if Jotunheim's climate is suitable for their local operations, the Titans can only linger on, occupying less than half of Jotunheim's territory. The other half of the territory is naturally Asgard's territory. Asgard has established countless outposts. The truly elite soldiers were all left in the 9 realms by Asgard. On the contrary, Asgard's own guardian force is very empty, and most of them are soldiers who have not fought for many years. The reason why this happened is related to Asgard itself. Asgard conquered the 9 realms, but the war never took place in its own territory. Therefore, the local warriors lack experience in war, and have been peaceful for too long. They believe that no race dares to provoke the Aesir Protoss. In fact, it is true. No one escapes Heimdall's eyes and ears. In order to consolidate his majesty in the Nine Realms, Asgard had to send troops to station in the Nine Realms. Those are the real elite warriors, because they want to deter other races. So there is this wonderful scene. Asgard is singing and dancing, while other places are in great chaos, and war may break out at any time. Moreover, the rebellion in the Nine Realms has never stopped. Not only Frost Titan, Flame Titan, etc., will attack Asgard's outpost whenever they have the opportunity. Under an ice cliff of unknown depth, countless Frost Titans gathered together. Frost Titan King Lof delivered his speech. "O oppressed people of the Titan family, we have waited for thousands of years. Today, we finally have the opportunity to revive the glory of the Titan race. The so-called gods are just our rations, and the Ear race is the only master of the Nine Realms." King Lof took the big stick in his hand and smashed the ice hard. A huge amounts of crack appeared in the ice immediately, but there was no sign of collapse. Here is the deepest part of Jotunheim, where the ice is as hard as the hardest metal. Definitely, the temperature here is also extremely low. Except for the Frost Titan and the Storm Titan, those couldn't reach here at all. In fact, with the invasion of Asgard, Storm Titan and so on have basically given up resistance. Now, I need warriors. Heed my call and sacrifice for the Titans. We have found the secret passage to Asgard. Now I need to get our treasure, the casket of ancient winters, the warriors back from the Asgardians. Are there any real warriors? King Lof raised his arms and called out, and the Frost Titans below responded immediately. All of them raised their arms high, wanting to be warriors. King Lof chose several Frost Titans, all of whom he knew and had abilities. This opportunity is only once, and if it fails, Asgard must be on the defensive. Only succeed, not fail. When we get back the treasures that belong to us, those traitors will be the first to pay the price. The voice of Frost Titan King Lof spread throughout the Frost Titan clan. The other Titans didn't expect that they would already be treated as traitors. But even if you know it, you won't care. In the battle between the Frost Titan and Asgard, the Frost Titan has almost never won. King Lof's greatest feat probably just blinded Odin in one eye. Get ready, set off now. At this moment, few people know that the Nine Realms is about to fall into turmoil. In other words, the entire Nine Realms has never been peaceful. Peace is a wonderful illusion that will never exist. No one can put the blame on Asgard. Even without Asgard, other races will appear to conquer the Nine Realms. Moreover, within the Nine Realms, there is never a shortage of their own struggles. All Nine Realms are spirits of light, always loving nature and participating in any struggle. That's why it is said that this will never be possible. But no matter what, it seems that this matter still does not affect the Earth. If Odin hadn't expelled Thor to the Earth later, the Earth seemed to be still developing by itself. Definitely, Odin doesn't drop him to Earth, and there's nowhere else to go. Who doesn't know that Thor is the prince of Asgard? Only places like the Earth that haven't entered the universe don't know. The Frost Titans attacked silently, while Ron and the others basked in the sun leisurely. Dormammu's call to Carrie is getting stronger and stronger. It's summoning magic. Once Carrie didn't pay attention, a black teleportation array even appeared under her feet. If Ron hadn't noticed it immediately and destroyed the teleportation array, Carrie would have been teleported away directly. Naturally, Ron was very angry about this wife-stealing behavior. But Clay refused to let him face Dormammu. Because she knows Dormammu too well. Know enough, and the more she can understand the horrors of Dormammu. Ron had no choice but to let Kelly practice quickly. When Kelly is strong enough, she can resist Dormammu's call and even make Dormammu unable to find him. Definitely, Dormammu knew he was on Earth. It will definitely want to invade the Earth crazily. But what? When the sky fell, there was a tall man standing in front of him. There is the Supreme Mage Ancient One, which is a headache. Although Ancient One is not Dormammu's opponent, but the magic formed by 3 holy places can protect the Earth from the invasion of dimensional forces, so there is no problem for the time being. This is where Dormammu gets annoyed. The existence of Kamar Taj makes it impossible for him to invade the Earth forever. Supreme Mage is also powerful in multi-universe, which annoys many dimension magic Shendu. That's why Dormammu kept trying to corrupt Kamartaj, starting with people around Ancient One. Where's Jessica? Ron didn't see Jessica's figure, so he asked immediately. Jessica is in danger. At the moment, Gwen said suddenly. Because spider telepathy suddenly reminded her. Even at such a distance, she knew that there seemed to be something wrong with Jessica. Oh, hearing Gwen's words, everyone looked over. Then let's go and see. Ron has Natasha Romanoff and Carrie housekeeping. He pulled Gwen by himself. Wait a minute, I didn't change my clothes. As Gwen said, she directly shaved off her coat. In order to avoid wasting time changing clothes, superhero usually wears the uniform inside. Like Gwen from at the moment. As soon as the coat is scraped, it becomes the appearance of Ghost Spider-Man. Beyond that is Superman. Superman's clothes are simpler, and often just need to be pulled casually, and then S appears in front of him. Let's go. After seeing Gwen's transformation, Ron then teleported directly to Gwen and disappeared. When Gwen's sight focused again, they had already appeared elsewhere. Although this is not the first time I have seen these magics. After their identities were made public, Ron and Carrie didn't hide their magic either. But Gwen at the moment still feels very magical. Jessica. But soon, she noticed the two people present. This is obviously in the underground passage, and it has long been abandoned. Otherwise, the subway will pass by from time to time. Jessica in a red tights is with another. Spider-Man. Gwen found that her spider telepathy kept reminding her, and apparently the other one was the same as her and Jessica, the same Spider-Woman, with the same ability. Who is this? Gwen looked at the opponent carefully. The opponent was pressing down on Jessica and knocked Jessica away. And she was wearing a big black spider tights with only a little white on it, and the same long black hair as Jessica, directly draped over the mouth of the moon. There is a spider web made of red wire grids on the white servant of the fierce mouth. Unlike Jessica, Jessica's cover is an eye patch, while she uses a long scarf to cover her nose. Only one eye is exposed. Unlike Jessica, who only covers her own eyes. Really two wonderful things. Even Gwen was amused. Especially seeing that Jessica was actually beaten. Jessica was also very depressed. She was only out to buy groceries, but spider telepathy suddenly reminded her. Then she followed the woman in front of her all the way to here. Moreover, this woman also has obvious hostility towards her. This is what she doesn't understand. At the moment, seeing Gwen and Ron arrived, they were naturally delighted. Who are you? Jessica propped herself up to stick to the wall, and then asked the person in front of her. You can call me Cobweb, are they here to die for you? Cobweb sneered, dismissing Gwen and Ron. Although it appeared suddenly, after feeling that Gwen was also of the same kind, he became arrogant. Because. She is the strongest. Cobweb's name is Cindy Moon, her ability is very special, and she can even find Spider-Man across the parallel universe. She's slightly weaker than Spider-Man, but she's much faster than Spider-Man. That's why she almost slapped Jessica. Her speed made it difficult for Jessica to have reaction time. If it wasn't for the spider telepathy warning, Jessica would have been knocked down long ago. Ron watched with interest, but Gwen couldn't help but rushed up. Ron's strength can make him disdain to participate in this kind of child fight, but Gwen can't. Gwen felt underestimated. So, she and Jessica have cooperated for a long time to form a tacit understanding, and began to encircle and suppress Cobweb. Gwen stuck to the top of the passage with a spider web, hung herself directly behind Cobweb, and immediately kicked over. Cobweb naturally reacted, and under the warning of spider telepathy, she didn't take any direct action. Because Jessica also blocked her escape route. The two worked together and seemed to lock the Cobweb. But just when the two were about to hit her, Cobweb dodged the attacks of the two while displaying his figure infinitely alluring in an extremely strange way of balance. Moreover, Gwen confiscated it and kicked Jessica directly. Ah! Jessica yelped and was kicked against the wall by Gwen. Jessica felt as if she was stuck to the wall, and before Gwen could swing back in midair, she was controlled by Cobweb with a spider web. Snapped. With a flick of Cobweb, Gwen bumped into Jessica. Fortunately, neither of them was an ordinary person, so they didn't get dizzy on the spot. Still, I feel shy. Combined, the two of them couldn't beat a Cobweb. But they also began to sigh in their hearts, the speed of Cobweb is so fast. Their reaction speed and dodging speed are completely unmatched by them. The two turned around and looked at the cobweb. The cobweb stuck to the top of the passage, and the three continued to fight. With preparation, Jessica and Gwen slowly gained the upper hand. After all, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, and Cobweb is not much stronger than them. The only strong point is speed. But when the two were on guard, her speed didn't help. Hateful. Cobweb's pretty face under the veil is a bit ugly. It was about to defeat a fellow of the same kind, but another difficult guy appeared. Then, she glanced at Ron, who was watching the battle with admiration. No way, this scene is really pleasing to the eye. They are all tights, showing their good figures at a glance, and they are all in different colors. Each of the 3 has its own strengths. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. From Cobweb's eyes, it can be seen that her appearance is not much different. So, Ron is not worried that the other party is a body killer. He thought of a very reasonable sentence. The best thing to watch is watching women fight. The woman became ruthless, beyond Ron's imagination. Although they don't like tearing and pulling hair like the common woman, the 3 of them are also extremely ruthless. Jessica may have tasted the pain before, at the moment kicked Cobweb. Boom. The huge amounts of power make it seem like there are echoes coming from the entire underground passage. This is also Spider-Man's constitution. If it were a common man, his internal organs would be ruined. It must have been the result of a sudden death on the spot. But Cobweb flew over with the power of this kick, and the target was okay, Ron. Hiss. The spider web sprayed towards Ron, and Ron didn't dodge or avoid it. Jessica and Gwen stopped immediately and looked at Cobweb with pitiful eyes. What does it mean? Cobweb felt the gaze, and immediately frowned. So confident, even if she is an idiot, she knows there must be something wrong with Ron. But by this time, her Cobweb was already glued to Ron. So she took the lead, trying to pull Ron to her side, and then threatened Jessica and Gwen. Cobweb pulls by hand. Why don't you move? Cobweb felt as if he was pulling a high-rise building. No matter how much force he used, he couldn't move it. This horrified even Cobweb. You must know that although her strength is a little weaker than others of the same kind, she is also the kind that can easily lift several tons. But before Cobweb thought too much, she felt a huge force coming from the opposite side. The spider that bit the Cobweb gave her almost perfect balance. This allows Cobweb to ensure the balance of its own body under any circumstances. This also allows her to make various movements in the air. Even if it is a top athlete, it is completely incomparable with her. Just like she avoided Gwen and Jessica's pincers in the air before, her body was like a mollusk. But at the moment, the force was so overwhelming that she couldn't control herself. It flew directly in Ron's direction. Cobweb saw that Ron's hand turned against the guest, and directly grabbed Cobweb and pulled it himself. This frightened Cobweb to quickly cut off the spider web, and the whole person rolled around a few times. Are you unwilling to come into your arms? Ron began to doubt his own charm. Thinking about his ordinary face, which always turns heads everywhere he goes, he was rejected by Cobweb. Cobweb, on the other hand, knew that he couldn't please him, so he ran away to the side. Jessica and Gwen immediately chased after them, swinging Cobweb. It's just that their speed is slower than Cobweb, and they can only watch each other run away after chasing for a long time. Hateful. Sir, why didn't you stop her? Gwen asked Ron angrily. I stopped her, but your speed was too slow, and she ran away after rolling on the ground a few times. Ron said casually. Let them figure this out on their own. And judging by Jessica's appearance, she just wanted to solve it by herself. You can tell by seeing her full of fighting spirit. Gwen was also at a loss for words. In fact, it was exactly what Ron thought. The existence of Cobweb aroused Jessica's competitive spirit. She's a tough guy and has competed with Natasha Romanoff before. Now that Cobweb has embarrassed her, she naturally wants to find her way back. Soon, she learned about Cobweb's news through her own channels. Her name is Cobweb, and it is said that she is now working for Kim. According to her, she was imprisoned for more than 10 years, so she behaved very strangely and full of violence. Her appearance is exactly to replace the disappearance of Erica and Bullseye. Jessica sat at the table and said slowly, as for the same kind who have been against Jin Bin all the time, they are on Jin Bin's side. This is something they don't seem to understand. But that's where things went differently. Cobweb was discovered by Jin and naturally used various methods to let her do things for him, CHCI. This was nothing like the way Ron remembered Cobweb doing things. But this is also normal. Either timeline leads to different results. Jin did not lose his number one thug at the moment. Erica was taken away by Daredevil, and Bullseye was directly crippled. He urgently needed someone to take their place, and he just fell in love with Cobweb. Cobweb agreed for some reason. Definitely, Cobweb is not as ruthless as others. In fact, she herself was very sad. The reason why he acted violently may also have something to do with being imprisoned for so many years in vain. All in all, very confusing. What are we going to do? Gwen didn't think about it so much, she just stood up and clapped her hands on the table, leaning forward slightly and asked. Very oppressive. Find her and help her correct her evil ways. Jessica said firmly. This information also made her realize that Cobweb is not a heinous person. The Spider family seems to be growing again. Ron looked at the two little Spider-Man girls in front of him and didn't say much. Carrie and Natasha Romanoff naturally didn't say much. Didn't even bother. Natasha Romanoff found herself a little powerless. Even if she is the most powerful agent, the most excellent Black Widow, she can't help in this situation. This made Natasha Romanoff a little uncomfortable. So Gwen and Jessica got busy. Whether it is day or night, they basically go out. And wearing a uniform, I am not afraid of being recognized by others. As long as they don't get noticed, they're disappearing and reappearing from Ron. In fact, they are also very careful. After all, they are not Tony Stark's pretenders, and they don't want to reveal their identities. Moreover, their identities are not as good as Tony, a playboy. Although he pretended, Tony did have the capital to pretend. As the majority shareholder of the Stark Group, he has enough capital to sustain himself. But even so, he got into endless trouble because of his high profile. The Congress and the Army kept making trouble for him, wanting him to hand over the tactics of the iron armor. This is definitely impossible for Tony. The battle armor is his second life, the most important thing for him. In order to toss these battle armors, he didn't even find a woman. Naturally, it is impossible to hand in. So, Tony was very busy with this. Jessica and Gwen naturally wouldn't make any unwise choices. Even though, many people want to contact them these days. Like the guys calling themselves S.H.I.E.L.D. A cloud of mist shrouded Asgard, making Asgard look like a fairy, and from a distance it was a huge amounts of continent. At the moment, where Heimdall's eyes failed to see, several Frost Titans slipped into Asgard. This means they are safe. The Frost Titan breathed a sigh of relief and began to move towards the area of Asgard. Asgard buildings are very visible in Asgard. The Golden Hall can be seen from a distance, and a golden light shrouds it, reflecting all over Asgard. At the moment, no one in Ardor even noticed that a Frost Titan had come to the land of Asgard. There's a reason they trust Heimdall completely. Another reason is that Asgard at the moment is an infinite celebration. God King Odin wants to inherit his throne to Thor Odinson. This is of course not a simple matter. And for such a big matter, the 9 realms have already been dealt with. This is why King Lof sees an opportunity. Because whenever such an important moment, Asgard will hold a banquet every day. Usually Asgard has a small banquet for 3 days, and a big banquet for 5 days, which makes the boring Aesir Protoss drink all drunk. This is naturally the case now, there are not even a few guarding soldiers. Everyone is in this festive atmosphere. But in this atmosphere, the undercurrent is surging infinitely. Amora and Lorelei, who were wearing hoods, looked at each other for a while, and they came to the dark place with the wine. Throw the wine jar aside and smash it into pieces. There's no one around here, Amora said after sensing with magic. How do we break the news to the Celestial Master? Lorelei immediately asked anxiously. I thought about a way, but Asgard was isolated by Odin's magic, and the magic couldn't be transmitted, and Heimdall couldn't hide it from the Celestial Master. Amora also said helplessly. Let Sif go. Lorelei thought for a while and asked. No, at this moment, Heimdall will not agree. Also, Brennhild and Sif don't know if they can fully believe it. Amora said worriedly. Lorelei also fell silent. The reason why the two of them are loyal to Ron is that for special reasons, they signed a devil-like contract, handing over their souls to Ron, and accepting Ron as their master. But Brennhild and Sif didn't do that. Although it was cultivated by Ron, it has never been able to firmly stand on Ron's side. Therefore, Amora and Lorelei don't trust them very much. Otherwise, because of controlling Heimdall, Lorelei suddenly came up with a bold solution. Amora was taken aback. Are you crazy? I'm not crazy. If that idiot Thor really becomes the king of gods, it will be difficult. Lorelei said with a firm face. At the moment Odin is not dead yet. If Thor is really allowed to succeed, it is very likely that he will have a lot of prestige and the support of many people. Amora frowned tightly. They couldn't pass the news to Ron, and naturally they couldn't receive Ron's instructions. So, they have to do something. Or like Lorelei said, try to control Heimdall, and then go to Earth to deliver the message. Or it can only destroy this grand ceremony. It made the god King Odin unable to successfully pass the throne to Thor. At this moment, Amora sensed several furtive figures. Someone. She immediately pulled Lorelei to hide aside. Then, I saw several frost titans. How come there are frost titans in Asgard? Lorelei immediately asked. The at the moment ceremony hasn't started yet, so it shouldn't be time to invite all ethnic groups. Hearing Lorelei's words, Amora immediately exchanged glances with her. And look at the careful look of Frost Titan. There is only one explanation. Smuggling. Amora narrowed her eyes, and said decisively, follow up, no matter what they are going to do, let's take a look first. She and Lorelei followed immediately. Fortunately, Amora's magic power is very strong. Easily concealed the Frost Titan, and was not discovered by the Asgards. Most people are drinking at the moment, so Frost Titan is also very smooth. In this direction, they want to sneak into Odin's treasure house. At the moment, Amora and Lorelei also got the idea of the Frost Titan. They looked at each other again and knew what the other was thinking. Whatever they want to do, make their noise louder. Amora laughed. Asgard warrior approached in the distance, and Amora directly controlled them with charm magic, preventing them from discovering the Frost Titan. Then, with the help of the two, Frost Titan approached Odin's treasure house abnormally. Odin sure didn't think of that. Lorelei laughed. We can't come any closer, the master warned us. Amora stops Lorelei. Ron had specifically told them not to go near Odin's treasury, it wasn't that simple here. Unfortunately, I still want to give some treasures to the master. If Frost Titan is okay, shall we go in too? Lorelei blinked her eyes wide and made up her mind. Then it's better to block Frost Titan directly. Amora said immediately. Soon, the shadow of Frost Titan disappeared from their eyes. Odin's treasure trove, located behind the throne, generally no one can get close to it. Naturally, there are no guards. Because, no guards can compare to the destroyer armor stored here. Frost Titans easily entered the treasure house. It's so easy that they can't believe it. It worked. Hurry up and find our treasure, and bring it back to King Loth. The rise of the Frost Titan is just around the corner. Yes, Odin is old. The new king is definitely not our match for the King of Fae. But, with so many treasures, I really want to take them. It's so hot, it's the eternal fire from the Flame Titan. A few Frost Titans were chattering in the treasure house, but they were not slow in their hands. Their eyes searched for the treasure belonging to the Frost Titan family, the casket of ancient winters in the treasure house. Odin is indeed an extremely narcissistic person. All the treasures are placed on stone platforms one after another, as exhibits. If there is a guest that Odin deems esteemed, he will bring it for a tour. These are all thanks to Odin. It can be said that after Odin lost the idea of fighting for hegemony, he only had the mentality of showing off. The eternal fire, infinity gauntlet, and the treasures of the dark elves. Definitely, it wasn't long before they found the casket of ancient winters. Hurry up, take the casket of ancient winters first. The treasures stored here are all treasures of the same level as the casket of ancient winters. I will bring back a few more later. The Frost Titan will be invincible. The leading Frost Titan said. But I didn't forget my purpose. No matter how good the others are, it's not as high as Casket of Ancient Winters bonus to Frost Titan. And if the Casket of Ancient Winters can't get it, then it's no use whatever they say. His hand stretched directly towards the Casket of Ancient Winters. Before touching it, he almost cried out comfortably. The Casket of Ancient Winters is huge amounts of bonus to the Frost Titan, just like the Eternal Fire is a fantastic treasure to the Fire Titan. But just then, they seemed to hear something, and then a pair of fiery eyes stared at them. No, it's the destroyer. The experienced Frost Titan immediately recognized that it was Odin's battle box. And by this time it was already too late. Boom. The destroyer armor directly opened the mask, and then the intense light beam directly enveloped these Frost Titans. In just an instant, these frozen Frost Titans turned into ice cubes, and then directly melted under the high temperature. Before they die, they are left with nothing but regrets. They definitely thought, how could Odin's treasury be unguarded? But unexpectedly, the destroyer was waiting for them here. After the destroyer finished all this, he disappeared into the shadow of the treasure house again as if nothing had happened. However, it caused a lot of commotion in the outside world. The destroyer's momentum was too great, and it attracted the attention of many people. Frost Titan is dead, let's go. Amora and Lorelei ran away immediately when they realized something was wrong. Fortunately, Amora has teleportation magic, otherwise she would definitely be discovered. At this time, Thor and Loki also came outside the treasure house. They rushed in directly, and before they could figure out what was going on, they heard someone shouting outside. A Frost Titan has broken into the God King's treasury. After someone fanned the flames, everyone in Asgard knew about it. Thor and Loki exchanged glances. Frost Titan is too arrogant. Thor couldn't control his anger. After all, he is still that impulsive boy. Then what do we do? Loki rolled his eyes and asked immediately. Definitely go find them trouble. Thor picked up his own Mjolnir and inflated it. When he was about to inherit the throne, Frost Titan came here, didn't this slap him in the face? No matter how good the situation is, Thor can't bear this anger. Not to mention he was originally a grumpy guy. It's not good, father will blame us. Loki said with a look of hesitation. It didn't look like it had anything to do with him at all. It's all Thor's own thoughts. What are you afraid of? I will bear whatever happens. Thor took the hammer and went straight out, and, 010, summoned his own warriors. Loki immediately laughed and said, yes, the Frost Titans are too hateful, the question is how did they come to Asgard? You remind me that we have to figure this out. Thor has one more reason to go to trouble with Frost Titan. Otherwise, Frost Titan can continue to send people to Asgard to make trouble. Loki looked like he had nothing to do with himself, and seemed to be forced by Thor. In fact, he kept talking, deepening the reason why Thor had to go. Originally there was only one reason for slapping the face, but then there were 3 or 4 more. He is indeed the god of deceit. Seeing this scene, Amora and Lorelei immediately laughed too. The 3 warriors immediately followed Thor. The reason why there are 3 warriors is that the original famous Sif is gone. After all, Sif is not very good with them, so there is no way to play together. Moreover, Thor had been taught a lesson by Sif before, so naturally he couldn't get rid of this face. With the discovery of Ron's identity, Wonger never got close to Shi Xiao. Neither Sif nor Brynhild, at the moment, knew what was going on. This is their status quo. Thor brought several people to Bifrost. Heimdall, turn on Bifrost and send us to Jotunheim. Thor said arrogantly. In his opinion, the Frost Titan King is not his opponent at all. It stands to reason that he has already been beaten by Ron, so he shouldn't be so crazy. But there is no way. Frost Titan has been too cowardly these years, and Thor has no idea of being afraid of them. No, I can't let you go. Heimdall directly refused. Heimdall, don't you want to know how the Frost Titan came to be? Hearing Thor's words, Heimdall suddenly felt hesitation. He was indeed curious how the horde of Frost Titans had managed to escape his sights and come to Asgard. It stands to reason that there is nothing in the 9 realms that he does not know about. So, Heimdall made up his mind. Heimdall immediately warned, Thor, Bifrost can't be turned on for a long time. If we send you there, we won't be able to pick you up in a short time. Bifrost will simply destroy Jotunheim if left on for an extended period of time. This is unacceptable to everyone, and Heimdall is not so mad. Don't worry, I'll take care of those Frost Titans. Thor shook his hammer and said. Heimdall looked at the people behind Thor, and said to Loki, Loki, look out. Loki definitely nodded, making a helpless expression. The champions who knew him as a man glared at Loki. In their opinion, Loki is too hypocritical, Thor is better. Most of Asgard think so. What people are afraid of is comparison. Although Thor is not much better, but with Loki, a sinister younger brother, as a foil to him, Thor becomes tall. But Loki's godhood determines that he can't change his personality at all. This is not without Odin's deliberate idea. Odin adopted him back then, so that Loki could rule Jotunheim when he grew up, and make Frost Titan a subsidiary of Asgard. But now, Odin gradually has feelings for Loki, and he doesn't think about it anymore. It's a pity that Loki must be set. Boom. Heimdall directly opened Bifrost and sent Thor and others there. He has the right to open Bifrost, and Odin can't say anything about him. Thor and others passed Bifrost and arrived at Jotunheim in an instant. Moreover, in order to save Thor's time, Heimdall directly teleported them to the hinterland of the Frost Titan. So, when several people saw the situation around them clearly, they were surrounded by a group of Frost Titans. Thor and others didn't have hesitation, so they went to war directly. Thorgal raised the Mjolnir in his hand, and then slammed it on the ground. Boom! The ground shook, and all the Frost Titans that approached were thrown away by him. Then, he throws Mjolnir out, knocking the Frost Titans away under his control. Thor's strength is indeed very strong, and Loki and others are not weak. So under his leadership, the Frost Titan had nothing to do with them for a while. But, as more and more Frosty Titans surrounded them, they felt strenuous. Moreover, King Frost Titan Lof was also alarmed. Thor Odinson, you're just a kid and you just want to fight to prove you're a kid. You will pay for your recklessness. King Lof shouted, ordering the Frost Titans to continue their attack. Thor wanted to reply a few more words, but the constant shocks made him speechless at all. King Lof stared down coldly, but he never thought that he could kill Thor and the others. Odin wouldn't allow him to do that. Also, he didn't plan to start another war with Asgard. Now even the casket of ancient winters is gone, what to fight against Asgard? Don't make Odin angry, just kill him. So, he just wanted to teach Thor a lesson. Then he sensed that something was wrong with Loki. This guy gave him a familiar feeling. Soon, Thor was tired and was crushed and beaten by the Frost Titans. 2 fists are hard to beat 4 hands, this is the case. No matter how strong he is not strong enough to fight against the Frost Titan race alone. Just then, Bifrost turned on again. This is definitely not to lure Thor, otherwise, countless Frost Titans will take this opportunity to rush into Asgard. So, here comes Odin. After many years, Odin is fully armed again. Seeing Odin's cautious appearance, Frost Titan Wang Lao knew there was no chance. Odin, he yelled, Lof, let Thor and them go. Odin rode an 8-legged steed and came to Thor and others. Thor yelled at Odin, Father, join me in killing them all. Shut up, an angry Odin shouted, blowing his beard. Thor was too frightened to speak. Lof had no choice, and he didn't even dare to say a few harsh words. King Lof could only stare at Odin and others with vicious eyes and return to Asgard through Bifrost. He knew very well that if Odin didn't want to kill him, he would have died long ago. If Hela at that time had the strength of Odin, the Frost Titan would have disappeared long ago. Although I don't know why Odin looks like this. But Lof won't thank Odin. Given the chance, he would kill Odin without hesitation, and attack Asgard. On Bifrost, Odin came back with a few people, and waved everyone away except Thor and Loki. The 3 warriors didn't dare to say anything, and left immediately. Heimdall also didn't dare to speak to a few people. Because it almost made a big mistake. Loki stood aside with an obedient and none of my business expression, bowed his head and said nothing. He knew that Odin would not blame him. Before Odin could speak, Thor couldn't help but said, Father, why didn't you kill those Frost Titans? Faced with Thor's question, Odin's head was suddenly full of black lines. At the same time, his anger was almost out of control. What he has done these years is to allow Thor to inherit the throne. And in order to make Thor become what he had in mind, he did not know how much effort he had put in. Then he just found out now. Everything is empty talk. Shut up. Then, Odin roared, Thor, what do you know other than fighting and killing with your pig brain? Thor was yelled at by his benevolent father, and his face suddenly turned a liver color. Obviously unconvinced. Obviously, He realized the huge difference in values between himself and his father. We should march into Jotunheim, as you once did, and scare them, so they never dare offend Asgard. Thor said with a little stubbornness. A flash of memory and scowl flashed across Odin's face. What did he do? Odin is no longer who he was back then. Thor's current appearance reminded him of Hela back then. The same rebelliousness, the same arrogance and ignorance. Definitely, Thor doesn't have Hela's strength yet, not so inflated enough to want to conquer everything. But Odin seems to have seen Thor's future, the same brutality, the same only knows how to make wars, and never knows peace. However, seeing Odin's face, Thor continued to speak instead. Your approach is outdated. When Asgard is gradually falling, you are still making long speeches. Odin finally couldn't bear it anymore, and directly interrupted what Thor wanted to say. You are a vain, greedy, cruel child who will never grow up. Odin roared out, one eye full of rage. He didn't expect that his second child would gradually become the same personality as his first child. Obviously, this is completely different from what he imagined. Asgard needs a benevolent god king who can bring it peace, not war. And you're an old fool. Thor retorted, his features crinkled together. Odin trembled all over. Unexpectedly Thor dared to refute him. Unknowingly, the shadow on him is heavier than Hela. Seeing Odin's angry look, Loki took a step to the side. Then continue to keep your head down, regardless of your own business. I want to take back your divine power. Seeing Thor who was still chattering, Odin stretched out his hand and grabbed it. Mjolnir went straight back into Odin's hands, and Thor looked at the enraged Odin. At the moment, he finally felt something was wrong. And Odin at the moment has already made up his mind. To pass the throne to such a Thor will only bring disaster to Asgard. Even with all kinds of scruples, Asgard is more important in Odin's heart in the end. So he just ignored the threat that Ron brought. Definitely, Ron hasn't been around for so long, maybe he has no idea about Asgard at all. While thinking this way, Odin pointed Mjolnir at Thor. In the name of my father and ancestors. As Odin spoke, he shook Mjolnir. And Thor's armor kept falling off by itself. Thor looked at all this in bewilderment, and only then did he realize that when he faced Odin, he had no power to resist at all. In other words, his power comes from Odin, and Odin is still the king of gods, so what can he resist? No wonder he is just a child in Odin's eyes, because he really is no different from a child. Weak, Thor Odinson, for your ignorance and arrogance. These peaceful star fields have entered the war because of you, and countless lives have died. I, Odin, the father of God, order you to be expelled. While Odin was talking, the breath on his body became extremely cold. Thor stared at Odin dumbfounded, then yelled impotently. No, Thor shouted, but couldn't change Odin's mind. He has decided to let Thor feel the suffering of the world. Therefore, Odin opened Bifrost directly, choosing the destination as Earth. Although he didn't want Thor to go to Earth, because of Ron's reasons. But he looked around the 9 realms and found that there was no more suitable place than Earth. On Earth, few people know Thor, and he has a few friends, such as Ancient One, who can take care of Thor. But if Thor is sent to other places, it will not be effective. Don't even think about places like Jotunheim and Kingdom of Fire. In other places, Thor's identity is also known, and the effect of experience cannot be achieved. Therefore, Odin can only choose the Earth. Big deal, teleport farther. With this in mind, Odin turned Mjolnir on Thor. Boom. A thunderbolt hit Thor directly, and he was so weak that he was deprived of his divine power, and he couldn't resist the thunderbolt at all. Thor is struck by lightning. At this moment, Thor flew backwards and flew directly into Bifrost, and all the armor on his body was shattered in an instant. Thor, banished. Seeing this, Loki shifted his pace to the side again. It's nothing to do with him, don't get hurt by mistake. Odin didn't shut down Bifrost directly. Instead, he took the hammer in front of him, and cast magic into it while whispering. Whoever is worthy to hold it will gain the power of Thor. After all, he threw Mjolnir into Bifrost as well, and then closed it. With Bifrost closed, Loki breathed a sigh of relief. He suddenly discovered that Odin seems to be a few years older. With this emotion, Loki obediently followed Odin out. As for Thor, he didn't care about Thor's life and death at all, as long as he couldn't die anyway. Surface brother, find out. As a hammer appeared in New Mexico, it immediately attracted the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Nick Fury also quickly learned about the situation through Dr. Elliot. Mjolnir. Mjolnir in Legendary. Definitely, don't bring Legendary now, it's most likely Mjolnir. Does this mean that the god Thor has also come to the Earth? Nick Fury asked, staring at Dr. Elliot. It's very possible. Dr. Elliot said, Thor never leaves his hammer. Is this Thor or the god of the hammer? Nick Fury thought to himself. But he immediately asked, does the doctor want to see it? No, I'm used to life here. Elliot immediately declined. Nick Fury nodded, and then didn't bother. He's sent Phil Coulson as his right-hand man. Definitely, the reason why he didn't go to see this Thor himself is because there is another more important thing for him. That is, an Arctic exploration team found a signal. Steve Rogers, captain of the United States, who was buried in the ice for decades, is back in the sky. Just before that, Nick Fury was still panting all day long. Suddenly he knew that the world was different from what he thought. There are not only human beings in this universe. That's huge amounts of pressure, and he's almost out of breath. Thus, there is the Avengers plan document. And just when he was thinking hard about who to use to form the Avengers, to his surprise, they all showed up by themselves, as if God knew his prayer. Iron Man Tony Stark, Green Titan Bruce Banner, the United States Captain Steve Rogers. And if possible, others, like Thor. While Nick Fury was thinking wildly, Ron was also not calm. Jessica and Gwen still go out from time to time, sometimes during the day and sometimes at night. Sometimes there is no one in sight for a day. However, they are also used to it. And some time ago, Ron has also noticed that Bifrost has fallen to the earth. After confirming the location with mental power, Ron knew that it was Thor who was banished to Earth by Odin. At the same time he breathed a sigh of relief. This means that Thor did not succeed in inheriting the throne. Otherwise, even Odin would not be able to expel a king of God. Ron was already thinking about what to do. Torment Thor a little. Or simply break Odin's spell, allowing Thor to gain Thor's ability. This is no problem for Ron. Moreover, since Odin threw him to the earth, he would definitely not let Thor get hurt. Odin still looks very protective. In fact, there is nothing Odin can do about it. He only has these 3 numbers in total, and the large Hela has been disabled, and he has been imprisoned by him for almost 3,000 years, and at the moment is probably not mentally normal. Although Thor has a tendency to become Hela, he thinks it can be saved. Loki doesn't have to think about it. Although Odin accepted Loki, he is a child of Frost Titan after all. And in the state of Odin, there is no time to practice another trumpet. Therefore, he can only put his hopes on Thor. Sir, Tony Stark invited you to a party. Quote. Natasha Romanoff came over, leaned over the arm of the chair and said. Ron glanced at it, and then said without looking sideways, I usually refuse this kind of occasion. Then I will reject him. Natasha Romanoff smiled. She is gradually transforming herself, and the fear of Ron still exists in her heart. But it hides it and makes itself look more open. It has to be said that this is very effective. Natasha Romanoff kept laughing from the bottom of her heart, secretly thinking that she had found the right method. Definitely, it's also because the Celestial Master doesn't actually look all that scary. Natasha Romanoff wouldn't be so afraid of Ron if she didn't have a scary memory of the Red House. On the contrary, Ron is a very gentle person, has great strength and ability, and has a gentle personality, not as cold as it seems. I can't even mention being irritable or something. Natasha Romanoff immediately shook her body and left, rejecting Tony Stark's invitation. After Tony healed his body and found a new element to replace palladium, he gradually returned to his original nature. Although the parties don't happen very often, he invites Ron when he's bored. However, according to Ron, it is generally rejected. Because of the noisy environment, it was not very suitable for Ron. Even in Asgard, he didn't go to the banquet very often. The banquets in Asgard are much more than those in the Lighthouse Kingdom. 3 days a small feast, 5 days a big feast. It was only after Ron made a name for himself that he could only drink, and alcohol was useless to him, so he stopped going. Snapped. Just then, the sound of a broken window interrupted Ron's thoughts. Looking at the mental power, I immediately saw the embarrassed figures of Jessica and Gwen. Can't you go somewhere more normal? Ron looked at the broken window and said with black lines all over his head. Spider-Man doesn't seem to like to take unusual paths. If it can walk against the wall, it is not normal to drive on the ground. If you can swing over with a spider web, you won't run away. What's more, the two of them broke the window now, and didn't even open the window. We didn't do it on purpose, the enemy is chasing us. Gwen exclaimed immediately. Ron took a look at the two who were in a bad situation. Especially Jessica, whose black hair is almost graying with dust all over it. There were a few holes in the tights on his body, but fortunately nothing was exposed. Gwen was better than her. Probably Jessica helped Gwen resist a lot of attacks. Wong Nujiao. No wonder Jessica was just panting and not talking now. Ron glanced outside. Night was falling. Otherwise Tony Stark wouldn't be inviting him to a party right now. Ron scratched the glass shards on the ground with his left hand, and then, as if time went backwards, the glass shards gradually condensed from the ground to the windows and slowly recovered. With a wave of Ron's hand, Jessica's wounds healed instantly, and her skin became extremely white again. What about mine? Gwen grabbed the hood and looked at Ron expectantly. Ron had no choice but to throw a rejuvenation spell at her. Don't think about it, rejuvenation is a normal recovery spell, which means to make the injured return to the state of spring. And at this moment, snapped. The windows that had just been restored were shattered from the middle to the surroundings again like a goddess scattering flowers. The three of them stared closely at the saboteur. He was wearing a black and white spiderweb tights, and a red veil covering the parts below his eyes. Cobweb. Looking at this, it was obvious that Jessica and Gwen found trouble with Cobweb, and were chased and killed by Cobweb all the way. They can't be that bad, can they? Sure enough, it didn't take long for many people to appear outside. Hey. Gwen looked at Ron and smirked. They thought they had thrown off their pursuers, but ignored the cobweb. Forget it, I don't want my house to be smashed to pieces. Ron shook his head. Instead of restoring the window directly, he spread his hands out. Then, in the eyes of everyone, the whole world seemed to be turned upside down. They were originally stepping on the ground, but at this moment, they felt that they were stepping on the ceiling. The entire manor was also split directly from the middle, and they appeared on the lawn in an instant. Seeing the golden color of the whole world, Jessica and Gwen were a little confused, let alone others. Gwen stepped on the lawn, and the lawn seemed real, but the grass bounced quickly. What is this? Gwen couldn't help the curiosity in her heart. Mirror space, you can see it as a mirror world. Ron said to Gwen. In addition to them, Natasha Romanoff and Kelly were left outside. Ron can easily control exactly who is pulled into the mirror space. And if he didn't want others to come in, even Ancient One couldn't help it. His magic attainments are much stronger than Ancient One. No matter how talented Ancient One is, she has only cultivated for a few hundred years, and her power is still borrowed from the Trinity Emperor Wyshan. And Ron has practiced magic for more than 3,000 years, and all his mana comes from himself, without the help of other gods and demons. That's the difference. At this time, the confused Cobweb thought about running away. But as soon as her body jumped up from the ground, she felt a great gravitational force. Or the suction is more appropriate. Then, she was sucked down into Ron's hand. I said, you can't escape my palm. Ron said flatly, looking very cold. However, Gwen asked, you don't seem to have said that. Ron shot Gwen a look. Gwen also quickly stopped talking, put on the hood, and there were other enemies. Ron held Cobweb in his arms casually, and Cobweb couldn't move with a little force. It's not that Cobweb didn't think of rebelling. But as soon as she moved, Ron felt a stronger force, which made her weak in an instant. Only then did she realize that the gap between Ron and her was bigger than she imagined. Cobweb instantly felt suicidal. She just ran after Gwen and Jessica, and she just ran into Ron. Then she has no chance to escape. It's not that she didn't want to escape early, but as soon as she had this thought, spider telepathy issued a warning. In this case, Cobweb has nothing to do. And knowing that she was able to escape successfully last time, it was obviously Ron who let her escape on purpose. This time, there was no such luck. Cobweb was caught in his arms and did not speak, and decided to be an invisible person. But the people who had parked outside Ron's estate got out. It was a huge amounts of size, about 2 meters tall, compared to what Ron had. And the whole body is full of swollen muscles, and the weight is obviously not low, more than 200 kilograms. Ron took a look and confirmed the other party's identity. He is Jin Bin, the Underground Emperor of New York. His real name is Wilson Grant Faith. As the boss of the gangster, the Underground Emperor, he is definitely a ruthless person. Definitely, the most ruthless thing is that he is also very ruthless to his own relatives. In order to make himself have no weaknesses and not be disturbed by emotions, Jin Bing decisively killed his wife to preach. Although this was because his son was assassinated, but because of this, his temperament changed drastically, and he decisively killed his wife to preach, which can also prove that Jin Bing is extraordinary. Most people can't be ruthless to his CHCA level. I'm afraid Nick Fury can't do it either. Definitely, Nick Fury can't be influenced by emotion at all. At the moment, Jin Bin stared at Ron and the others fiercely. There are many bodyguards around him. Because his top thug Bullseye and Erica are gone, Kim hired a lot of people to work for him. You are the master of these two little Spider-Man. Jin Bing spoke slowly. His voice was heavy and powerful, and his aura was so heavy that the people around Ron felt a little out of breath. Gwen stiffened her neck and said, "You're the little Spider-Man." Hearing this, what she was most upset about was Jin and said she was little Spider-Man, not the word, master. Ron gave her a weird look. Jessica didn't even refute. Jin Bin glared at him directly, and Gwen, who was fearless, shrank her neck. It seems that Kim had previously impressed her. Otherwise, Gwen's character would not be frightened by Jin Bing's glare. In fact, Gwen is already very mature compared to her peers. After all, she has experienced a lot, and girls mature earlier. But in Ron's eyes, she was still a child. You are Wilson. Ron didn't call Jin Bing, because his English is king, which made Ron very upset. Let go of my men, I can spare your lives. Jin Bin narrowed his eyes, and then said to Ron. He is very confident. Even if the situation is a bit wrong now, it is the first time he has seen even the mirror space. However, as the Underground Emperor, he has absolute confidence in his own strength. Your men. Ron glanced down at Cobweb, who was like a baby in his arms. Cobweb is not short, about 1.7 meters. But at the moment was held in Ron's arms, but it was very petite. Because of her recklessness and ignorance, she broke into my territory at will and angered me. So, she's my trophy. Quote, Ron looked at Cobweb and said, pinching her chin through the veil. Cobweb looked at Ron with a pair of eyes, full of fear, but no hatred. She's just doing things for money. But she was still afraid of Ron hurting her. HMPH, who are you? Jin Bin was furious, but he didn't do it directly, but held back, and asked a question before starting the battle. If the background is huge, although he is not afraid, there is no need to die. Although Jin Bin has many muscles, he is not a person without brains. However, Ron's words really pissed him off. I just heard Ron say, I am the master of this world, if I want you to live, you can live, if I want you to die, you have to die. Ron spoke very domineering words in an extremely flat tone. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.